Wu Jiang leaned against the bathroom door and blew a smoke ring. The smoke ring slowly rose. Reflecting in the misty mirror was the woman's face. The more she thought about tonight's events, the angrier she got. This year she had a boyfriend. Introduced by her family. Rich. Good-looking. Fluent in speech. Exactly the type Wu Jiang liked. She thought he could be the one to marry. But who would have thought that man was exactly like her? A playboy. Just 10 minutes before they broke up, that man was caught cheating on her in bed. Thinking back to that time, he was still calm. Even saying that they weren't compatible. Saying that she was the type of person he couldn't control. Because she had had too many boyfriends. He couldn't control her. Damn it. Even if Wu Jiang had so many boyfriends that they lined up from City A to Kyoto, she wouldn't do something so unfaithful while in love. Okay, love or not, Wu Jiang couldn't bear this anger. She smiled faintly at the man, feeling that she was green in the head, and directly slapped him, making his big face light up. Wu Jiang thought more and more disgusted. Frowned, forcefully extinguished the cigarette, threw it into the trash can, pushed the door open and walked out of the bathroom. The most exciting bar was definitely at night. The slender waists and white thighs captivated people. The indifferent gazes between men and women could ignite a fierce fire, burning the heavens and earth. Many dark corners that no one knew contained countless private matters. Wu Jiang relied on his senses to return to his table. Just as he passed by, he discovered that there were a few more people at his table. Glanced over. Who is it? Chen Yan smiled at Wu Jiang. Put down the glass of wine on the table. Clank. A sound. Joking. Hey, Wu Jiang, let me introduce these two handsome guys who just arrived to you. These two handsome guys are both Qin Fan's good friends. In the same company as him. She pointed at the handsome guy outside. This is Li Siyuan. Then pointed inside. This is Zhou Qi. Wu Jiang nodded at these two handsome guys. It couldn't be helped that Qin Fan's company had such handsome male stars. The two people in front of her were the best proof. Li Siyuan was the type with charming eyes, a lively expression, and the handsome guy Zhou Qi inside fit the current aesthetic standards. A soft-spoken guy, with clear eyes, a body that naturally exuded a cold aura, not belonging to the world, not blending in with the surrounding atmosphere. A bit interesting. Wu Jiang heard Chen Yan introduce herself, chuckled, lowered her head and took a sip of wine. She admitted to herself that Zhou Qi was really her type. It wasn't that Zhou Qi was so beautiful, but that this fairy-like temperament made it hard for people not to think of what this guy would be like in bed. A highly educated but spoiled person. It was a bit interesting. Li Siyuan looked at the woman in front of her. Her eyes were very soulful. Her gaze contained a beauty that was not possessed by ordinary people. I know Miss Wu Jiang, a famous photographer in the industry. Whoever can be photographed by Miss Wu Jiang once, their career will be wide open. Their future will be bright. Wu Jiang covered her mouth and smiled lightly. The ring on her finger shone under the light but did not overshadow the beauty in her eyes. Her gaze stopped on Li Siyuan, but her gaze was following the man beside her who lowered his head and turned the ring. I don't dare to accept. I don't dare to accept. ... The party lasted until almost dawn. Li Siyuan and Zhou Qi walked together. Qin Fan carried Chen Yan who had drunk too much. Wu Jiang slowly walked behind them. Chen Yan's house was right behind the bar. The silhouettes of the three people were immersed in the dim light. Wu Jiang walked on their shadows. Qin Fan turned his head and said, "My friends are really good. Aren't they?" He lifted Chen Yan up. "Knowing that you just broke up, I deliberately called the two most handsome newcomers in our company. Such newcomers. It's convenient to hang out with." Wu Jiang sighed. "Only you understand me. Do you like Li Siyuan? I'll let him contact you in the future." Wu Jiang recalled how Li Siyuan tried to approach her and even please her. Feeling a little bored in her heart. That guy looked really handsome. But with that kind of face she could find a lot. It wasn't fun to play with. Unlike Zhou Qi, that quiet and serious person. She liked him. The more patient he was, the more she wanted to see him in a state of panic and anger. Right? Wu Jiang knew she wasn't a good person. Rotten from head to toe. Wu Jiang smiled and shook her head, not caring if the person in front of her saw it or not. In her mind appeared the scene from an hour ago. Wu Jiang stood in front of the men's restroom smoking. The men passing by all put their eyes on this woman. There was a man who didn't know what to do and said a few words. She didn't pay attention to anyone. You're out. Wu Jiang raised her hand to brush her messy hair behind her ears. Her red lips were gentle. Her tone carried a touch of coquetry and intimacy. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Zhou Qi had just finished washing her hands. And her hands were still not dry. He was not surprised by the appearance of this woman. Ever since this woman saw him, she had been observing him. And he knew this observation very well. He raised his eyebrows slightly. His expression not smiling. What's the matter? Wu Jiang, Ed. She observed the man in front of her from top to bottom. She was 168 centimeters tall. And today she was wearing a pair of high heels. But the man in front of her was still much taller than her. He was truly a wonderful person. I think. She deliberately prolonged the last syllable. Her voice carrying a bit of hoarseness after smoking. A bit seductive. What do you want from me? Mr. Zhou? Zhou Qi was straightforward. I don't like women who smoke. Wu Jiang chuckled lightly. There were countless male stars who wanted to advance through her. Those who rejected her right from the start like today were really rare. It was a bit interesting. Wu Jiang immediately threw away the cigarette. Used her foot to extinguish the flickering flame. She leaned forward, looked up. The distance between the two of them was instantly shortened. She helped him adjust his tie. Her eyes stopped on his face without any fluctuation. Like it or not, she deliberately stopped, tiptoed. The two of them got closer. Brother Zhou, try it and you will know. After she finished speaking, she directly stuffed a card into his coat pocket. After finishing the action, she gently touched his chest and then smiled smugly. Turned around and left. Zhou Qi's eyes followed her back deeply. The clear eyes just now were now as deep as the night. He raised his hand to take out the card from his coat pocket. Wu Jiang returned to the hotel at 7 in the morning. She had a photo shoot at 2 in the afternoon. This free time was a good time to make up for lost sleep. Room 1203 of the Dating Hotel was the room she rented every year. When her schedule was tight, she often stayed here because it was convenient to travel to the studio. She had a house in the suburbs. A large villa with its own garden. It was a property that her rich father had bought for her. As soon as she entered the hotel door, Wu Jiang was stopped by the lobby manager. Miss Wu Jiang, this is the room card that a guy asked me to deliver to you. Wu Jiang took the room card from his hand. Her expression clear. Okay, thank you for your hard work. The sound of high heels clicking on the floor. Wu Jiang was neither in a hurry nor impatient. Her index and middle fingers held the rejected room card and stepped into the elevator. Pressing the button for the 12th floor. The elevator light was dim. Light and shadow danced in her eyes. The red lips gently curved. Her mind was filled with the image of that guy's cold eyes. This prey, the harder it is to eat, the more interesting it is. Zhou Qi stepped down from the care car. Li Siyuan followed closely behind. Brother, that's Wu Jiang. Li Siyuan looked impatient, patting Zhou Qi's shoulder. Do you know how many people in the industry are waiting to sleep with her? Not only is she beautiful, but the resources in her hands are not small. Sleeping with her for one night, your career in the future will be limitless. Why are you so unreasonable? The guy showed no emotion, patting the hand that was placed on his shoulder. His tone cold. Not interested. What? Not interested? Li Siyuan saw the guy in front of him speed up his steps. He also followed closely. He dragged his voice. She has a figure. She has beauty. You're not interested? Chu Qi naturally knew what the stubborn Li Siyuan was thinking, and didn't want to pay attention to him anymore. She quickly entered the elevator, pressed the elevator door close button, and left Li Siyuan alone outside. Who didn't know Wu Jiang? She was the young lady of the Wu family in the north of the city. The pearl in the heart of the chairman of the Southwest Entertainment Group, and one of the top photographers in the industry. Just mentioning her reputation as a photographer. As long as she took a big photo shoot, she could successfully debut and firmly establish herself as a follower. Not to mention the entertainment resources behind her. Chu Qi lowered her head and played with the ring on her finger. Of course, this opportunity had to be seized. But not now. Everyone had a common disease. Easy prey was often not delicious. Moreover, for hunters like Wu Jiang, who had power, influence, intelligence, and reason, she was even more difficult to control. In this industry, Who was clean? Everyone had their own schemes. Chu Chi also had her own thoughts. For fame, for benefits, and for other things. Wu Jiang slept very deeply. When she opened her eyes it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She jumped up from the bed, took a big gulp of water from the bedside table, woke up a bit, then quickly washed her face, packed her things and went straight to the studio. In the car she did some light makeup. For photographers, image management is still very important. Today she took pictures for artists under the Tian King Entertainment Company. The hottest boy band right now. The group Zine 8. Speaking of Tian King Entertainment Company, like the Southwest Entertainment Company, it is also one of the top big companies. And it is also the company of Chin Fan and Chu Chi. Big companies of course have the benefits of big companies. Resources that small companies cannot match. But big companies are also extremely harsh on newcomers. The predecessors crush the potential successors. Newcomers have little chance to stand out. But big companies also have no shortage of newcomers. Even though they know the situation, they still have to obey authority. As soon as they entered the door, the assistant greeted Wu Jiang. The guests are ready in the studio. The underwater props are also ready. Wu Jiang nodded, threw her bag to the assistant, and went into the dressing room herself. Today's photo shoot was underwater. Although it was autumn now, not winter, but it was quite hard for a person to stay underwater for such a long time. As soon as Wu Jiang entered the studio, she saw a large crowd, which surprised her. She turned her head and asked the assistant, "What happened?" "Hello Ms. Wu Jiang, we contacted by phone earlier. I am Chen Luoshi, manager of Zine 8 Group." The woman handed Wu Jiang a business card. "The current situation is like this. The weather has been cold recently. Taking pictures underwater is a bit difficult. So we came up with a method." "What?" Wu Jiang looked at the crowd and found a familiar face in a corner. Zhou Qi. That guy's gaze passed through the crowd and stopped on her. He nodded gently and smiled, greeting her. Wu Jiang immediately moved her gaze away. That guy appearing here was definitely not a coincidence. The room card was rejected. Playing a soft and hard game with her. We know that this underwater photoshoot is just a few back shots. So I found some male artists in our company who have similar body types to our artists to be body doubles. Wu Jiang smiled, turned her head to look at Chen Luoshi. Her eyes seemed to say, "Are you sure?" Chen Luoshi noticed that look and quickly added, "We also invited our company's professional photographer to go underwater. That way we won't bother Ms. Wu Jiang. Of course we still need Ms. Wu Jiang to take photos in the future." Wu Jiang smiled, understanding a few things in her heart. Now, famous male actors also brought their coquettishness to her. Even when taking pictures for magazines, they could find a few body doubles. And those photographers also clearly told her to be quiet. How skillful, how wonderful. Perhaps the guy standing in the corner was one of those male actors' substitutes. How pitiful. Okay, Wu Jiang agreed, wanting to see what kind of trick they would play on this stage. Wu Jiang pulled a chair to sit and play with her phone. While observing the situation at the other end, she didn't know how they were taking pictures underwater, but she could clearly see that Chen Luoshi and those young male actors were clearly teasing others. The target of the teasing was clearly the body doubles. The other stuntmen were relatively okay. Only the worst was Zhou Qi. He was bothered to come and go many times. But this guy didn't get angry. Patiently endured them. Wu Jiang sat to the side watching the play. She wanted to see what kind of temperament this guy had. "Miss Wu Jiang, someone is looking for you at the front desk." Wu Jiang nodded. There was a package looking for her to sign for. It was something Chen Yan had bought for her at the duty-free shop before. She asked the delivery man to help put the item on the shelf in the office. Then gave him a small tip. "Miss Chen, if you keep taking pictures like this, not only the young actors down there won't be able to stand it. Us photographers won't be able to stand it either." Chen Luoshi glared at that guy. "I didn't mean to make things difficult for you guys. You all know that the person called Zhou Qi is unreasonable. He made a mistake with Sister Qi Wen. The superiors have said it. We salaried workers can't help but listen." The woman's expression changed again, comforting him. "I know you guys are working hard. When I get back I'll tell Sister Kiwen. Let her give you a raise. Okay, anyway, today you guys are just for show. Just take some random photos. Don't use your pictures. How you take them isn't important. The most important thing is your face. You guys also know Miss Wu Jiang, the top photographer. At that time I'll let her take pictures of you guys again. When we have the pictures, we'll spread the news that these photos were really taken by you guys. No wind, no waves. Aren't you guys both famous and profitable? The guy thought for a moment, felt that this bargain could be done, laughed. All right, thank you Miss Chen first. Wu Jiang stood behind the door. She didn't show any expression as she listened to this entire conversation. The Kiwan sister in her mouth was the mistress of the owner of the Tianqing Entertainment Company. And also Wu Jiang's college friend. The two of them had been like fire and water since college. And now that she was in the prime of her life, she still didn't forget to turn around and kick her. The fire in Wu Jiang's heart had not been small recently. When Wu Jiang entered the studio, they were still working. Zhou Qi's face was pale, clearly unable to bear it anymore. Wu Jiang spoke up. All right, let's stop here for today. Chen Luoshi, who was sitting on the sofa, heard the sound and turned around, a fake smile on her face. Miss Wu Jiang, we haven't finished taking the photos yet. It's still early. Can we take a little more? Wu Jiang raised her eyebrows and smiled. Take a little more? She threw the documents in her hand directly at Chen Luoshi, an impatient expression on her face. I won't take this photo anymore. Hurry up and get lost. Wu Jiang, you're canceling the contract and you have to pay compensation. Everyone around stopped what they were doing and gathered around. Compensation? Wu Jiang's eyes lit up. The corners of her mouth curled into a smile that scared Chen Luoshi. Don't think I don't know what you guys are doing. I recorded the conversation between you and that photographer. Do you want to hear it again? Wu Jiang brushed her hair and continued. Compensation. Who compensates who is still uncertain? While I'm not angry, quickly pack your things and leave. Chen Luoshi's face turned pale, knowing that she was wrong. She didn't say anything more. She glanced at Wu Jiang. Pack your things. Let's go. Oh, that's right. Chen Luoshi, let me remind you. Wu Jiang took a step forward, narrowing the distance between the two of them. Her tone gentle. My personality isn't very good. And I also don't like your entertainment industry tricks. Be honest. I'll make it clear today. Qin's Tianqing Entertainment. The boss is Qin Chu. The young master is Qin Fan. What is Chen Luoshi? At most she's just a mistress that Qin Chu keeps outside. A whore also wants to borrow a knife to kill someone. Framing me. When you go home you should reconsider how much weight you have. Don't die without knowing why in the end. Chen Luoshi was so angry that her eyes were bloodshot. She faced Wu Jiang's smile. Her hands clenched into fists and placed them beside her. Seeing Wu Jiang finished speaking, she turned and left. Don't be in a hurry. I haven't finished speaking yet. Wu Jiang turned her head to look at her back. Her tone was gentle. I've remembered it today. Don't let me see you again in this entertainment industry. She turned to look at the group of young male actors behind Chen Luoshi. Also, I'm used to the ups and downs of the entertainment industry. Not yet firmly in a position. Not yet a scholar but already threatening the general. Everyone, leave yourself a way out. Wu Jiang looked at this group of people and had a real headache. Co Song, send the guests off. She was in the center after causing a stir. And then retreated alone. What a coincidence. Wu Jiang finished her work and got off work. As soon as she got out of the elevator, she saw the guy in front of her. His hair was still not completely dry. Slightly damp. The light shining on his hair made it sparkle dark black. I was waiting for you here. Wu Jiang looked surprised. Oh, waiting for me? The guy curved his eyes and smiled. His voice like pearls rolling on a jade plate. Clear and cute. Thank you today. Zhou Qi. Wu Jiang raised her eyes to look at him. Her expression serious. I don't like people using tricks on me. In the entertainment industry there are many guys who want to climb into my bed. You're not the only one. To put it bluntly, I like you. It's your honor, but you playing a soft and tight game with me is a bit offensive. Today your obedience and submission is just using them as a show for me. I've seen this bitter and humiliating scheme since I was young. In short, I don't like people who think they're smart. You go. Wu Jiang's words on the surface were a refusal. In reality she wanted to see his reaction. If he left now, then he would really be stupid. Zhou Qi understood. If Wu Jiang really didn't like him, Hated him. She wouldn't have said so much to him. The woman in front of her was really telling him, if you want something, just tell her directly, don't beat around the bush. Work is a matter of negotiation, not guessing tricks. He spoke frankly. I want to go to Southwest Entertainment. Wu Jiang smiled. He was a smart person. What benefits do I have? What do you want? Don't you understand? You give me a chance. I'll give you what I have. Okay, but. Wu Jiang raised her eyebrows and smiled. Opened her bag, took out the card to prevent rejection and gave it to him. Let me check the goods first. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Wu Jiang edited the photos until noon, finished work and went straight home from the company to catch up on sleep. Unexpectedly, when she woke up, it was already pitch black outside. She was awakened by the doorbell. Her sleep wasn't very good. The slightest noise was enough to wake her up. Zhou Qi was wearing a black coat, still holding things in his hand. It was raining outside. His shoulders were slightly wet. Good evening. Wu Jiang was wearing a nightgown. The belt was loosely hanging around her waist. Just by bending over a little, she could reveal most of her spring color. Her wavy hair hung down to her shoulders. Her bare face without the support of makeup. Her face was a little less radiant but a little more innocent. She was clearly not fully awake. Nodded to the guy in front of her. Walked barefoot on the floor and then lay down on the sofa. Zhou Qi followed behind her, gently closing the door. He sat across from her. The light in the living room just shone on her unintentionally exposed little leg. She was already white. Now she looked even whiter. The two of them were silent for a while. Wu Jiang took the initiative to speak, her voice carrying a bit of hoarseness from just waking up. Let's eat dinner first. This dinner was not to Wu Jiang's taste. Too bland, without any flavor. She liked spicy flavors. Not interested in this soup. Ate a few bites, then put down her chopsticks. Took out 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator. Opened one and gave it to the guy. Wu Jiang was completely sober. She remembered his purpose for coming here. Today was her inventory day. She pushed the food on the dining table aside, deliberately sitting across from Zhou Qi, on the empty part of the dining table. At this moment, she was a head taller than him. Wu Jiang lowered her head. Zhou Qi raised his head to meet her gaze. There was no need to say anything. Everything that happened tonight was clearly understood by both of them. Her hair fell on his cheek, itchy and uncomfortable. Zhou Qi did not avoid this feeling. He enjoyed this painful torment. Zhou Qi asked her, his tone intimate as if they had known each other for a long time, why do you eat so little? Is it not to your taste? Wu Jiang narrowed his eyes. It really is not to your taste. A little disappointed. Do you know what can interest me? She frowned, as if she was really asking him a question. Hot breath blowing on his face. Doing that? The guy's eyes were filled with unclear emotions. Wu Jiang caught the lustful look that flashed across the bottom of his eyes for just a moment. She laughed, laughing at his lack of ability. At the moment she was about to open her mouth, his big hand placed on the back of her neck. A kiss fell. It was better to say it was a kiss than a bite. He kissed very hard. Wu Jiang wanted to push him away. The difference in strength between men and women was proven in her favor at this moment. The next moment, the can of water in her hand fell to the ground. Thud, a small circle of water was sprayed out. And along with it, it soaked his pants and her white legs. Before she could feel the temperature of the water, he picked her up and pressed her down on the dining table. Wu Jiang spoke up to stop her. Zhou Qi, I don't want to be here. He said, okay. After he finished speaking, he quickly took off his tie, directly tying her hands together. He chuckled. The cold expression on his face disappeared without a trace, replaced by an unknown amount of desire. I wanted to do you as soon as I came in. Who told you to seduce me? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Qi kicked the chair behind him aside. He pressed down on her. The hot kiss fell from her forehead to her eyes and then to her red lips. All the words of refusal between her words were swallowed by him. His big hand directly spread her legs. One strong and decisive leg sandwiched between her lower body, making her unable to resist. The kiss continued, and the kiss became softer and softer. Wu Jiang's consciousness was lost in the rhythm of this kiss. Beside her ears was his heavy breathing. Even through a layer of hard fabric, she could feel the erection in her private place. Zhou Qi kissed Wu Jiang's earlobe and whispered, "Be good." The next moment, Wu Jiang's nightgown was thrown to the ground by him. Under the bright light was her fair and tender body. Incredibly beautiful. Chu Qi was clearly startled. His eyes filled with lust. His cold voice mixed with lust. You're not wearing anything. His big hand placed on a soft spot and kneaded it a few times. It turns out Miss Wu is very eager. He only played with her chest a few times, and the 2 plum blossoms had already bloomed. He impatiently lowered his head to enjoy this wonderful taste. His voice vague, so Miss Wu's chest is so soft. You, Wu Jiang groaned. Shut up. He chuckled. Shut up. The next moment, the strength between the girl's legs was withdrawn, and his big hand directly probed into her fragrant garden. So wet. And you still shut up? After he finished speaking, he pulled out the finger that had probed into her vagina, and with a pop sound, under the reflection of the light, the liquid in his hand became even more transparent. Wu Jiang looked at the transparent liquid in his hand, her face red with anger. This guy on the bed and under the bed were completely not the same person. Chu Qi didn't wait for her answer. The kiss directly fell on her fair skin. Biting, pulling, licking. The movements of his hands did not stop. The middle finger simulated the sexual action of entering and exiting her vagina. The thumb played with her most sensitive little pearl. The sound of water flowing in the process of thrusting in and out rang in both of their ears. His eyes red. The girl under him seemed to have turned into a puddle. Wu Jiang was completely knocked out by the feeling of pleasure from every part of his body. His mouth let out a soft moan. Give me. Don't be in a hurry. Chu Qi looked at her. The girl under him had eyes and eyebrows filled with spring. He really wanted to take a picture to see how debauched she was in bed. Miss Wu will really beg me to do you. How arrogant were you? As soon as he finished speaking, his finger pulled out of her vagina's mouth, forcefully twisting her clitoris. Ah! She spurted out a stream of water from her pussy mouth. The water directly shot onto his pants. She was so happy that even her toes curled up. Zhou Qi enjoyed watching her orgasm but had no intention of letting her go. He lowered his head, going straight to her pussy. He gently opened her soft lips. The small hole was still contracting and releasing water. His hot breath hit her entrance. Saying seriously, Miss Wu, there is too much water. I have to help Miss Wu. Otherwise it will be too slippery. It is not good to do, right? Zhou Qi. She raised her waist because of the stimulation. Her mouth let out a broken moan. Inside her pussy was his hot softness. He heard the girl under him calling his name. His eyes became even deeper. He did not miss any part of her. Every piece of soft flesh inside was taken care of bit by him. Even her clitoris was taken care of by his big hand. Pulling, pressing down, massaging. Wu Jiang didn't know how many times she had climaxed. She only knew that this guy's technique was too terrifying. She had no strength left in her body. Her whole body was limp on the dining table. Her pussy was still dripping wet. Her body was convulsing. Feeling good. Zhou Qi chuckled. Miss Wu, I've played you to this point? He raised his eyebrows. But I haven't come yet. With a splat, his erection was finally released. He spread her thighs. His big hand gently parted her delicate petals. The small hole that appeared was twitching and secreting nectar. The glands rubbed against the narrow slit. He deliberately did not give her quick satisfaction. Chu Qi looked at the wet glands. Chuckled. Ah, so slippery. Wu Jiang felt like she was about to be played to death by him. On his body, except for the slightly wrinkled shirt, the zipper of his pants that he had pulled down, the other places were intact. And she was naked, controlled by him in his hand. His glands teased the narrow slit. His big hand stimulated her sensitive pearl, causing the girl to let out intermittent moans. Each of his slides was like torture. Each one touched her heart but deliberately did not give her satisfaction, causing the girl to moan, Give me, give you what? Chu Qi's eyes raised slightly, carrying a hint of evil. Put it in. Wu Jiang struggled to free her tie. Her body slowly lifted up at the same time. Zhou Qi didn't say anything. His eyes fell on the two people. Due to the girl's movements, there was a slight gap between the glands and the narrow slit. His erection hit the dining table. Slightly cold. His jet black eyes shining brightly. He reached out to hold her butt tightly, directly pulling back. His movements were decisive and strong. Ah, everything was swallowed. His entire being was swallowed by her. His sudden intrusion directly caused Wu Jiang to reach orgasm. Her mind was broken. Her eyes were absent-mindedly scattered. Zhou Qi looked at her like this. A bad intention arose. He directly pulled out and forcefully thrust into her pussy. A small place was immediately torn by him. Zhou Qi let out a hum. The tendons in his neck clearly visible. His hand slapped her butt hard, leaving a clear handprint. Relax. Wu Jiang completely didn't hear his words. Her consciousness was focused on the place where the two people were intertwined. His large size crushed the tender flesh inside her, not sparing any sensitive spot. Zhou Qi became ruthless. The fine sweat on his forehead ran down his cheeks, just in time to drip onto the rose on her fair skin, moistening this rose. At the same time, his movements were strong. Each stroke used all the strength of his entire body, as if wanting to rush deep into her soul. The sound of the table rubbing against the floor, the girl's soft moans, along with the sound of water and the pap-pap sound of flesh during intercourse rang in the ears of the two people, blurring their consciousness. Ah, a little lighter, a little lighter. If it's lighter, how can you be so lewd? Zhou Qi, you bastard. Zhou Qi laughed, directly hugging Wu Jiang into his arms, his hugeness still inside her. Go back to the room. As soon as his words fell, his footsteps had already taken a step, but the strength below him did not stop. The wild strength made Wu Jiang dodge. Zhou Qi directly held her waist tightly and told her to listen. Wu Jiang lay close to his ear. His tone was a bit fierce. If you continue like this, I will. Then what will you do? Zhou Qi kicked the door open, conveniently thrusting deeper. Wu Jiang groaned, her voice already hoarse. I will ban you. Zhou Qi laughed coldly. Fine, you ban me. He simply pulled out, threw the girl onto the bed. The clothes on her body were thrown to the ground. Isn't it good that I don't have a job? I can have time to press you every day. When you go to work, I will go to your office to make love. When you go home, I will make love in your car. Make you cry like a little cat. Let them all hear this big photographer being made to cry by me. This forbidden little star. Wu Jiang was thrown onto the bed and immediately curled up in the blanket. Hearing his threats, she rolled around in the bed, but her little place couldn't help but flow. When she was about to continue scolding him, the blanket on her body was pulled away by him. He pulled her naked legs and pulled her closer. His legs were spread wide open. He stood under the bed and thrust into her. Her shaking breasts were held in his hands. He pressed her again and again towards his erection. Zhou Qi held back his voice. Don't you not want to be done by me? Why is there so much water? The bed sheets are all covered in your water. He turned Wu Jiang over, putting her in a kneeling position, his hands sliding along the ravine once, covered in water, still reflecting under the light. He let out a tsk sound, rubbing his sparkling hand on her chest, not stopping, directly grabbing her chest forcefully, guiding her body towards his little guy. One deep stroke after another, each thrust firmly penetrating her. The other hand continuously patted her butt. Her white butt was clearly marked with handprints. Wu Jiang was made limp by this fierce force. If it wasn't for him holding her chest to protect her from falling, she would have been made to lie face down. He asked, "Is it good?" Wu Jiang gritted her teeth. The moans were suppressed in her throat, but she couldn't help but let out a moan from between her teeth. She cursed, "Good. Good. Good. Damn good." Slap. Zhou Qi gave her another slap on the butt. Wu Jiang was both happy and in pain. Her legs were already weak. Her entire body lying on the bed was being fucked by Zhou Qi. Zhou Qi saw that she was more obedient. His movements were a little gentler. Wu Jiang saw that he was slowing down behind her. Her mouth was stiff to the core. Can't you do it anymore? Just like that? Zhou Qi was clearly angry, gritting his teeth and saying, "Wu Jiang, you damn thing are really lacking." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Qi directly hugged Wu Jiang down, leaned her against the door, placed one of her legs on his waist, and continued to move his hips, kissing her white neck, leaving deep red kiss marks. His other hand followed the movement of his hips and made her purl. "Ah, no need, Zhou Qi, no need. Didn't you just say I can't?" Zhou Qi directly covered her mouth, and continued to move his hips. Wu Jiang didn't know how long he had been doing this to her. Her entire body had lost all strength. His last attack was simply to tire her to death. After who knows how long, the thick essence erupted in her body. This hot stream destroyed her to the point of nothingness. So hot that she wanted to avoid it. After Zhou Qi finished ejaculating, he gently thrust a few times and then pulled out. He lowered his head to look at her swollen little place that he had made her swell. Her little mouth was gagging and secreting his essence. Wu Jiang woke up and slapped him directly. But the force was like scratching an itch. Damn it. Zhou Qi didn't get angry but smiled. His eyes narrowed into a line. At this moment he was like a harmless puppy. His hand directly loosened its strength. Wu Jiang sat down on the ground with soft legs. Her white semen mixed with honey water dripped from her small place onto the ground. His bangs were already wet with sweat. His eyes were shining with water. The smile on his face had not yet disappeared. He joked with her, "If you keep cursing, we'll continue." He saw that she was much more obedient. He picked her up from the ground again. "Be good. Don't move. Let's go take a shower. Look to the left a little. Raise your right hand a little higher. But, raise your butt a little higher." Wu Jiang made a hand gesture. "Put away the camera." "Okay." Wu Jiang finally finished the whole morning photo shoot, and only now had the chance to look at her phone. Zhou Qi on the other side had already prepared the procedures for quitting and accepting a new job. The contract breach fee was advanced by Wu Jiang for him, and he waited for him to earn money before paying her back. Wu Jiang helped Zhou Qi arrange the relationship with the Southwest Entertainment Company on the other side. Currently, old man Wu rarely manages business matters, and the Southwest Entertainment Company is temporarily being managed by his adopted son, Lin Zhe. Lin Zhe didn't find it strange that Wu Jiang had inserted a male actor into the company, and was actually against it at first. After all, the Southwest Entertainment Company was a legitimate company, not Wu Jiang's harem of gigolos. Later, most of the people Wu Jiang put in were famous and earned a lot of money for the company. Plus, Wu Jiang was a person with a high EQ. Every complicated relationship was resolved peacefully without any problems. In the end, Lin Zhe turned a blind eye. "Wu Jiang, I've already arranged that person for you this time." "Lin Zhe, thank you for your hard work. Goodbye." Before Wu Jiang could say anything, the beep beep sound came from the other end of the phone. What a bad habit. I'm so angry. Lin Zhe was adopted by the Wu family when he was 6 years old. A year later, Wu Jiang was born. She had an older brother who was 7 years older than her since birth. This Lin Zhe, handsome, good body, not bad person, just not very pleasant temperament. Cold to everyone, always has a frowning face. How can people like him? Damn Lin Zhe, what a bad personality. Wu Jiang washed her hands, sat in the office and started editing photos. She finished the work at hand. It was already 6 p.m. She looked at her phone. The WeChat interface between her and Zhou Qi was still stuck at yesterday. The two of them almost only met at night, then made love. The next morning Zhou Qi left early. The two of them never did anything but go to bed. Zhou Qi was the most qualified partner. The relationship between the two of them was the most standard unspoken rule. Wu Jiang rested her chin on her phone, sighed, felt annoyed, and couldn't help but call Zhou Qi's phone number. The call was just connected. The other side was very quiet. "Hello." Wu Jiang didn't have time to regret it. Reacting afterwards, a feeling of regret welled up. For the sake of a little face, she restrained herself from hanging up, saying dryly, "I'm Wu Jiang." I know. What are you doing, Miss Wu? Is there something wrong?" Wu Jiang frowned when she heard, "Miss Wu." Zhou Qi. This man was really very clear about what happened in bed and what happened outside of bed. In bed he called him, baby. Outside of bed he called him, Miss Wu. She didn't know what she was angry about. She couldn't say it out loud. Her mouth stiffly replied, "Nothing. Goodbye." Chu Qi on the other end of the phone heard the beep beep sound from the other end, and chuckled. Wang Qiu sat beside him, watching Chu Qi answer the phone and laugh, shaking his head, continuing the topic the two had just talked about. "I really don't understand how the young master of the Chu family would abandon the family's assets, and instead become a miserable little star, and would willingly be secretly ruled by a girl from a small family. Is your brain stupid?" Chu Qi's eyes were still on the call log. He made a silence gesture. then pointed towards the door and walked out. Chu Chi stood in a corner of the hallway, listening to the beep beep sound from the phone, his hand fiddling with the leaves on the flower pot. The other end of the phone didn't pick up right away, as if he was deliberately controlling the time of the call. Chu Chi's voice carried a laugh. Have you had dinner yet? Wu Jiang's heart was pounding. The pen suddenly stopped, and he drew a horizontal line on the paper. No. Then let's go have dinner together. No need. I'll be at your company in 10 minutes. Zhou Qi finished speaking and hung up. The smile on her face grew even more intense. She quickly walked back to her room to get her coat and placed it on the chair. I have something to do. I'll go first. See you later. Zhou Qi. Zhou. Wang Qiu looked at Zhou Qi's back and shook his head helplessly. You're all crazy. You're all crazy. Ellipsis. Wu Jiang's, I can eat by myself, sentence hadn't finished yet. The other party had already hung up. She muttered, let's eat together. The phone screen turned off, reflecting Wu Jiang's smiling face. She saw that she was smiling and immediately put on a serious expression. What are you laughing about? What's so funny? Isn't it just a meal? There are many people who want to eat with me. Wu Jiang put a piece of lamb into the red-hot pot. Director Zhu Wen recently has a new play. He's missing a second male lead. You can try it tomorrow. Zhou Qi rolled up his sleeves, revealing his fair wrists. He picked up some green vegetables from the red-hot pot, dipped them in water to wash off the oil. Okay. Oh, I have an overnight shoot tonight. I can't come to your place. Wu Jiang raised her head to look at him. The man was leisurely dipping a few pieces of lamb into the red-hot pot, then handed her some juice. She nodded, absent-mindedly replied, oh. During this meal, the two of them didn't talk more than 10 sentences. In the end, Zhou Qi received a phone call and left. Wu Jiang couldn't contain her anger. She threw down her chopsticks. The hot pot water splashed onto her white collar, leaving a stain of oil on it. Wu Jiang was very dissatisfied. She was dissatisfied with this lover. She ordered a few more bottles of beer, and ate the remaining dishes herself. Hello. Wu Jiang put down the beer bottle and answered the call. Come home right away. What's the matter? If it's nothing, I'll hang up. Go home and see what good things you've done. Wu Jiang returned to the Wu family home at 10 o'clock at night. Aunt Chen opened the door for Wu Jiang. Miss, the boss is waiting for you in the study upstairs. Wu Jiang handed her coat and bag to Aunt Chen and was about to turn upstairs when she heard a woman's voice behind her. Wu Jiang, you're all grown up now. Don't make your father angry anymore. Wu Jiang couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. If the person who spoke wasn't Si Chun-won, she would have thought someone was kindly reminding her. Sure enough, Wu Jiang turned around and saw the woman's hateful face. She turned around and said with a smile, don't be in a hurry. I'll deal with you later. Wu Jiang pushed the door open and entered. Mr. Wu saw her enter, coldly snorted, directly threw the entertainment newspaper to the ground. Wu Jiang walked over and picked it up to read. She read the headline with interest. The second miss of the Wu family of the Southwest Entertainment Company ruthlessly broke off the engagement, hooking up with a young fresh meat of the entertainment industry. The newspaper wrote about Trang Han, her dead dog ex-boyfriend, in a sentimental and pitiful manner, describing her as an ungrateful woman. Even the secret photos of her having dinner with the young fresh meat of the entertainment industry from 800 years ago when Trang Han didn't even know who she was were pulled out. It was obvious that Trang Han had taken the initiative to take the initiative. You didn't care about me studying photography. You also turned a blind eye to those worthless boyfriends. You also agreed to this marriage at first. Why can't you make me feel at ease? Why do you still make a mess like this? The teacup shattered beside Wu Jiang's feet. The sharp piece of porcelain cut through her bare ankle. Wu Jiang frowned slightly, and couldn't help but stand aside. She smiled lightly. You agreed? Was this marriage really something you agreed to? Who was the one who held a knife to your neck to force you to agree to this marriage in the first place? Wasn't it Dad? Wu Jiang looked at the man sitting on the chair. His eyes red, his tone carried helplessness. The things I promised. I definitely won't break my promise easily. Now you don't believe me. You believe others, right? Wu Zhen's voice was hoarse, holding back his cough. You tell me, how can I believe? Look at the good things I do. The boyfriends I meet. You tell me, how can I believe? That's not it. It's not because of these things. It's just that Dad has never believed me. Not once. Wu Jiang turned around, threw the newspaper in his hand to the ground, and walked past it. You're leaving today. Don't come back here again. Wu Jiang paused for a moment, pushed the door open and walked out. As soon as she turned around, she bumped into Si Chun-won, who was waiting at the door. The woman looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. You're very good, Si Chun-won. Wu Jiang smiled. She looked at the beautiful young face of this woman and wanted to rush up and tear it apart. I hope you'll always be this good. Goodbye. No sending. Si Chun-won raised her eyebrows, her expression full of complacency. She moved a little to the left, making way for Wu Jiang. Ellipsis. As soon as Wu Jiang stepped out of the elevator, she felt her legs go weak. Her spirit had reached its limit. She raised her head and saw Lindsay standing at the door. She tried her best to suppress the discomfort in her heart. What are you doing here? I heard you and Dad had an argument. Wu Jiang nodded and walked over, her expression trying to act as if nothing had happened. Yeah, I'm used to it. You. Lindsay paused, and finally said, Are you okay? Wu Jiang shook his head, expressionless. It's okay. What can I do? Actually, Dad is also worried about you. He wants you to find a good person. All right, Lindsay, you go. Wu Jiang interrupted him. You should know, I don't really want to see you. Lindsay's eyes flashed with a hint of pain. He wanted to say something, but in the end he could only say one sentence. Then I'll go. You take care of yourself. Okay, I won't see you off. Wu Jiang watched him enter the elevator, turned around and entered the password to open the door. The house was dark. The handbag in her hand was thrown to the ground. She tiredly slid to the ground, her back leaning against the cold door, and before her eyes was the cold darkness. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes, falling drop by drop, and finally came the woman's sobs. The sobs getting louder and louder. She sank into her knees. Her face was wet with tears and warmth. Even though her eyes were pitch black, her brain was filled with images flashing through her mind. It was the image of her when she was little. She pulled the corner of her father's shirt and told him to go home and visit her mother. She told her father that her mother didn't hate her. She didn't mean to get angry. She didn't use any tricks. She was just sick. She was really sick. Her father looked at her like he was looking at a piece of trash. Even pushed her away and scolded her for being annoying, saying she was disobedient and didn't understand. What happened next? What happened next? Her mother laughed in front of her, cried in front of her. She couldn't even tell if her mother was really sad or happy. In the end, her mother committed suicide in front of her. She used her hand to cover the blood spurting from her mother's neck, but couldn't stop it. The blood kept flowing more and more. Her face, her hands, her body were covered in her mother's blood. Who could help her? Who could save her? Why was there so much blood? Why was there so much blood? Bang! A sound. The lights in the house turned on. Wu Jiang! Wu Jiang! Wu Jiang! Wake up for me. Wu Jiang closed her eyes. She couldn't see the person in front of her clearly. The image was blurry. She leaned forward, trying to open her eyes wide, her hands trying to touch the face of the person in front of her. She whispered, Zhou Qi. There's too much blood here. Zhou Qi breathed a sigh of relief. Let's move to another place. Move to another place and there won't be any more. He directly carried Wu Jiang into the bedroom. Wu Jiang still hadn't fully woken up. She gently leaned against his ear and sobbed. Zhou Qi, there really was a lot of blood just now. Zhou Qi held her, his chin resting on her head, softly saying, No, there's no more blood now. Really, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. My leg hurts. Zhou Qi, it hurts so much. Hearing this, Zhou Qi hurriedly put Wu Jiang down and checked her leg. The white socks were stained with blood on her leg. He gently blew on the wound, raised his hand to cover Wu Jiang's eyes. Her eyelashes gently brushed against his palm, but it felt like they were rubbing against her heart. He softly said, It doesn't hurt. Be good, Wu Jiang. It doesn't hurt. He comforted her for a while. Seeing that she was stable, he went to get the first aid kit to disinfect and bandage the wound on her leg. After finishing these things, Wu Jiang fell asleep on the bed, the tears on her face still not dry, her mouth still sobbing. Zhou Qi, there's so much blood. The man's eyes became gentle. His expression was worried and speechless. He reached out to dry the tears on her face, kissed her fair cheeks lightly, and comforted. Be good. Don't be afraid. The girl's steady breathing became dense. Zhou Qi gently got out of bed, turned off the light, then walked out of the bedroom. He took out the half-pack of cigarettes that Wang Qiu had given him from his coat pocket. Even the lighter was Wang Qiu's. He went to the balcony, lit a cigarette. He opened the balcony window a crack. The smell of cigarettes was blown away by the wind. His consciousness also became more clear. Outside the window, the lights were sparkling, the stars were shining brightly. Although it was bright outside, but his heart was as dark as the deep night. It was undeniable. This was the first time Zhou Qi felt helpless. She fell into his arms. When she cried and cried in pain, he could do nothing but comfort her. He had always been proud and arrogant, believing that there was nothing he could not do. But today, all his pride and arrogance was completely destroyed by a girl's tears. Perhaps he should have realized that this day would come. The first time Zhou Qi met Wu Jiang was at Wang Qiu's bar. At that time, he was very successful, in the eyes of outsiders. He was kicked out of the center of power of the Chu family, but suddenly returned to the country and took power, while the other sons of the old man Chu lost everything overnight. The young master of the Chu family seemed to have completely failed. But after only one night, he became the real ruler of the Chu family. Zhou Qi fought this battle for 3 years, and he finally won. Zhou Qi had very few real friends. Wang Qiu was one of them. The day he returned to the country, Wang Qiu held a small party to celebrate him at his bar. At that time, Wu Jiang was drinking the wine that the bartender mixed for her. Under the lights she smiled and talked very charmingly. He didn't know what she said to the young bartender, causing the young man to blush. And she seemed to be mocking. She made the bartender bow his head gently. A kiss was about to touch his cheek. But when she was about to touch, she suddenly moved away from the young man, smiled very evilly, then left a stack of money on the table and left. In fact, that night, Wu Jiang's deliberate charm not only fascinated the bartender, but also him, this outsider. Seeing him lose focus, Wang Qiu understood a bit in his heart, and told him that woman's name was Wu Jiang, the young lady of the Wu family. After that, the newly in power man refused all domestic interviews, concealed all his personal information, and completely dived into the circle he despised the most. The unspoken rules in his eyes were child's play. Sexual transactions in his eyes were the simplest means. He set up a trap to approach her, cleanly came to her, let her color him, let her color. He now felt that he was crazy. But did he regret it? It seemed not. He thought of this and laughed softly. What are you laughing at? Zhou Qi heard the noise and turned his head. The person in his arms was standing behind him, and his body's first reaction was to turn around and close the open window. When he touched the window, a voice from deep within reminded him, Zhou Qi, I am done. The man closed the window, walked quickly towards the woman in front of him, raised his arms to hug her, gently placed her on the dining table, and a kiss fell. This man's kiss was more intense and passionate than any kiss between them. His tongue wrapped around her everywhere, and together with her tongue, entangled endlessly, not giving her any space to retreat. His breath rushed over. In addition to the strange smell of possessiveness, there was also a slight smell of nicotine. This kiss was a little hotter, but lacked a bit of desire. Zhou Qi's big hand tightly wrapped around her waist, touching her. Hot. Wu Jiang's consciousness was a little confused. The distance between the two of them seemed to have narrowed without limit because of tonight's kiss. And she, who wanted to keep her distance, was unconsciously attracted to this man, sinking with him. When her hand touched his back, the last bit of reason in Zhou Qi's head collapsed into a thin thread. And at this moment, it was broken. Fuck this cat and mouse game. Fuck this scheme. Thousands of curses surged in Zhou Qi's heart. The kiss he gave her became even hotter. The purer the kiss at first, the more impure it was now. The clothes of the two people were stripped off piece by the man and thrown to the ground. Mixed together, like two bodies were entangled with each other, not knowing who belonged to whom. Zhou Qi's kiss never stopped. His hot hands went to every part of the girl's body, finally reaching her private place. He inserted 2 fingers into her secret garden, the water flowing down along his fingers slowly. The man whispered in her ear, hot breath blowing into her ear. It's wet. Immediately after, the man held her onto the sofa. Then he got on top of her. His big hands directly spread her legs. He entered her in an overwhelming and conquering posture. Ah, Wu Jiang moaned. Below her was the soft material of the sofa. In front was the man's hot and hard body. He overwhelmed her, making her sink. He entered her, deeper and deeper. This time the man was different from the previous times. This time he just wanted to possess her purely without any technique like the previous times. He seemed to just want to forcefully merge into her body. Each thrust went straight to her flower core. He didn't kiss her. There wasn't any comforting movements. Only his and Wu Jiang's hands were tightly intertwined. The man's eyes stopped on the girl's face. He just wanted to remember the image of her deeply immersed in him in the bottom of his eyes. He panted, Wu Jiang, call my name. He repeated it over and over again. Wu Jiang was unable to breathe under his fierce attack. Each of his thrusts was strong. Each one slid past all the sensitive spots inside her. The two people's lower bodies collided with each other, making a slap slap sound. Her sensitive spot hidden in the forest was carefully taken care of by him. Wu Jiang's legs went soft. She could only weakly cry out, Zhou Qi, very good, very good. He was both strong and comforting her under him. He suddenly thrust a few times deeper. Wu Jiang let out a scream. Her entire body tightly squeezed his largeness. The water gushing onto the tip of his cock. The feeling of pleasure rushed up his spine from the tip of his cock. He clenched his teeth to avoid being forced to surrender by the girl under him. He cursed in a low voice. So slutty. He immediately. And Zhou Qi was the master of the ocean, controlling Wu Jiang's ups and downs. Wu Jiang didn't know how many times she had come. The strong man pressed against her flower heart, pouring all his hotness on her. She felt her whole body soften. Her body convulsed. Zhou Qi looked at the woman under him like this, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and cursed in a low voice. No talent. Immediately after, he hugged her into his arms again, his chin gently touching her head, and his eyes fell precisely on her small mouth that was releasing semen. The sofa was soaked with wetness. Seeing that scene, Zhou Qi directly put the girl into a kneeling position. He knelt on the floor and watched the semen flow out from her small mouth. Ah, Zhou Qi directly used his hand to take out the semen. I was so hungry just now. Now I want to spit it out. What do you want in the end? Wu Jiang didn't have the strength to reply to him. This man was indeed serious for a moment and then not serious again. Zhou Qi looked at her with red eyes, not being polite at all. Standing on the floor leaning on his dick and thrusting. Is it hard, big, hot? Wu Jiang bit him hard from below, not paying attention to him the whole time. Zhou Qi looked at her angrily, directly thrusting, causing Wu Jiang to cry out. Don't tell me. If you don't tell me, I'll make you die. At first, Wu Jiang refused to yield, but after a few of the man's movements were clearly tiring her out, she could only open her mouth to beg. Hard. What's hard? The two of them went back and forth a few times. Finally Zhou Qi made Wu Jiang completely submit. The girl could only say under him, your dick is so hard, so big, so hot. Slap. Zhou Qi slapped her ass. You said it wrong. It's hot semen. Wu Jiang was slapped until she trembled. Her body tried to dodge forward. After a few attempts at dodge, she was pulled back and fucked hard by the man. Look up here. While doing her, Zhou Qi used his hand to hit her ass. He didn't even spare his own little treasure. Wu Jiang turned her head. The image of the two entangled at this moment was witnessed by the mirror beside her. She was kneeling on the sofa, while he was standing on the floor. This wasn't doing her, it was clearly riding her. The more Wu Jiang looked, the more sensitive she felt. The little girl under him bit Zhou Qi tightly, making him unable to help but use more force. Ah, Zhou Qi, slow down, slow down. Zhou Qi did it until his eyes were red, saying anything. Do you like other people to see me doing you? After he finished speaking, he slapped her butt again. A big photographer doesn't know how to take pictures. One day take a picture of me doing you. Take a good look at your lewd posture. Wu Jiang was so fucked that she couldn't speak. Her mouth was making, aha. Awake. Zhou Qi finished dressing and turned his head to see Wu Jiang looking at him. Wu Jiang nodded. Last night, the two of them were too rough. She couldn't speak. and she had no strength left. Zhou Qi saw her satisfied expression and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and laugh at her. Can't get out of bed? Wu Jiang turned her head to the right, not wanting to look at him. She had never discovered that this man had such a hateful tongue. Zhou Qi saw that she was angry and stopped teasing her. He went out to pour her a glass of water and placed it by the bed. He patted her face. I'll order takeout for you. Remember to accept it. After he finished speaking, he skillfully kissed Wu Jiang's cheek. Seeing that she seemed to object, he leaned down and bit her lips. I'm leaving. Wu Jiang heard the sound of the door, and immediately sat up. Her body was a bit miserable, full of bruises left by that man, but she felt very refreshed. There was no sticky feeling after finishing. It seemed that Zhou Qi had bathed her last night. Wu Jiang's mood immediately improved. She took a sip of water from the bedside table, and muttered, "This man is quite thoughtful." PFFT. Wu Jiang accidentally scratched the wound on her leg last night when she got out of bed. The small animal-shaped patch covered her wound in time, and the surrounding blood was also cleaned up. Recalling the things she had forgotten, Wu Jiang sighed deeply. She felt that the reaction to seeing blood was not the usual dizziness. It was just that sometimes seeing blood would trigger a reaction, recalling the image of her mother committing suicide when she was young. Then her vision would blur, and she would also feel dizzy. She also couldn't explain it clearly. This symptom was just sudden. She also didn't know when it would happen. Over the years, she had also seen quite a few psychologists, but they were not very effective, and they did not happen often, and did not affect her life. Zhou Qi did not ask her what happened last night. As if nothing had happened. Wu Jiang had a gigolo for a long time, a model in the entertainment industry, and the two of them were quite compatible in bed. But one time Wu Jiang was sick and he unfortunately witnessed it. That man talked too much and was too curious. So Wu Jiang gave him some money and resources, and the two of them broke up and did not contact each other again. What if Zhou Qi was like him? Wu Jiang thought for a moment. Zhou Qi probably wouldn't. That man, whether out of respect or calculation, would not allow himself to be curious. What if he was really like that? Wu Jiang thought for a moment, and she would probably tell Zhou Qi to go away. But fortunately, he did not, otherwise it would be difficult to find such a gigolo. Ellipsis. Zhou Qi had just finished his audition, and as soon as he walked out the door, he saw Si Tian. Si Tian handed him a bottle of water and asked how he was doing. Zhou Qi looked at Si Tian, who was clearly anxious but still appeared calm on the outside, and couldn't help but laugh. He deliberately opened the bottle cap slowly, took a sip of water, and slowly said, "Not bad." Si Tian was Zhou Qi's new manager. He had never managed an artist before, and had only been an assistant to a manager before. Finally, he had an artist under his command. So he was definitely very concerned. In addition, Zhou Qi's conditions were very good, and he believed that he could make him famous. Si Tian heard these words and breathed a sigh of relief. He understood that, "not bad," in Zhou Qi's mouth meant, success. He couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. If this movie really belongs to you, you will have an unlimited future. Zhou Qi sneered, and he lay on the back seat of the artist care car, closing his eyes and resting. It must be said that Wu Jiang was really generous. This resource was too strong. Countless celebrities were competing to use this film to transform themselves into real artists. The male supporting role he auditioned for was a sentimental character that the audience loved to pity. No matter how he acted, he would attract fans. If he acted well, becoming famous would not be a problem. But, he thought, had Wu Jiang treated each of her previous lovers well? Every time he thought about this, he felt inexplicably upset. But there was still one thing in Zhou Qi's heart. Ellipsis. Wu Jiang was called by Qin Fan's deadly series of phone calls. It wasn't even dark yet. Chen Yan and Qin Fan, these two cowards, were waiting for her in this bar to have fun. As soon as she sat down, the two young men beside her approached. Wu Jiang glanced at him, picked up her glass of wine and took a sip. Qin Fan, what's the matter? Qin Fan and Chen Yan glanced at each other. Qin Fan smiled. Last time I introduced you to two little stars that you didn't seem to like very much. So today I carefully selected two young and proactive people for you. What do you think? Wu Jiang signaled the two young men to move away from her a bit. raised her head and glared at Qin Fan and Chen Yan. She couldn't say that she liked the two little stars introduced last time. She could only casually say, "How old are these two kids? Are they adults? I'm not so hungry that I would touch a minor." "Oh." Qin Fan held her shoulders. "They're definitely adults. Don't worry. And they're very clean. Qin Fan's damn appearance doesn't resemble a rich young master. He's just a damn matchmaker." Wu Jiang patted him off. "Go away. Don't make me sick." She turned her head to look at the two young men, took out 500 from her wallet and placed it on the table. "You guys, go back to where you came from. This is the taxi fare. Hurry up and go." The two young men didn't move. Qin Fan signaled them. They immediately took the money and left. "Qin Fan, I said what's wrong with you?" Wu Jiang spoke halfway, raised her head and saw a familiar figure. "I have something to do. I'll go out for a bit." "Wu Jiang, you," Qin Fan called out to her from behind. Ellipsis. Si Chun Won, "You're also quite good." Wu Jiang held a bottle of wine and sat down. Si Chun Won signaled to everyone around, leaving only the two of them. "Miss Wu wasn't taught a lesson enough last night. And you're here to take care of me today?" Wu Jiang chuckled lightly, poured herself a glass of wine. "Of course I'll take care of you." She changed her posture, sitting cross-legged. "Actually, I've always had a question. Si Chun Won, should I call you stepmother or sister-in-law?" The smile on Si Chun Won's face immediately stopped. She looked straight into Wu Jiang's eyes. Her eyes filled with laughter and arrogance. Her disdainful gaze bluntly piercing her bones. Wu Jiang slowly said, "Sorry, I mentioned your sore spot. But," she deliberately paused, her eyes filled with a hint of mockery, "I heard that this property can be inherited, but I have never heard of any woman being able to inherit it. The important thing is, tell me, my brother is such an arrogant person. Would he want a woman who has been almost spoiled by his stepfather?" Wu Jiang, "Miss C, don't be angry." Wu Jiang smiled gently. "I was just a little curious. Yesterday I thought the news was that Zhuang Xing deliberately framed me. But now I feel that such a vicious plan, even if Zhuang Xing had 800 courage, she wouldn't be able to do it. Other than Miss C, I can't think of anyone else who is so disgusting. Think about it. If Lindsay knew that you had deliberately caused such a conflict between me and my father, would he be grateful to you? Or give you a chance to climb into his bed? Do you have evidence? Why do you say it was me?" Wu Jiang laughed as if she had heard a joke. "Evidence? So what? So what if I don't?" She lowered her head and played with the ring on her hand. "You should know that no matter what I say in front of Lindsay, he will definitely believe it." Si Chun Won laughed when she heard this. "Yes, I know. Lindsay likes you. Lindsay believes you. But then what? Even Lindsay, an outsider, believes you unconditionally. But your biological father thinks you are a girl without principles." Bang! Wu Jiang raised his hand and slapped her, challenging her. "What? Want to fight back? Do you dare?" She said this, laughing. "Miss C has always had a weak and pitiful image in front of others. If you fight with me in public, the image you have built up for so long will collapse in an instant. And your plans of many years will also go up in smoke. But I'm different. I'm just a girl without principles. I can hit whoever I want, and sleep with whoever I want." Wu Jiang took a few steps forward. As if remembering something, she raised her chin. "The next one is Lindsay. What do you think? He'll be very happy." Wu Jiang, "You're really crazy." Wu Jiang smiled and nodded. She took out her phone, dialed the number in front of Si Chun Won, and said, "Lindsay, are you free tonight? Let's go have dinner together." Wu Jiang said goodbye to Qin Fan and Chen Yan on the phone and left immediately. And the call to Lindsay was naturally a fake. However, when she parked the car and walked out, she saw Lindsay standing at the hotel door. "Why are you here?" Wu Jiang stood about a meter behind him. Lindsay heard this and turned around and saw Wu Jiang standing behind him. Wu Jiang looked as healthy as ever. Lindsay felt relieved and said frankly, "I just wanted to come see you." Wu Jiang smiled lightly, raised his eyebrows. "I'm done watching. You can go now." Lindsay wanted to say something but stopped. Lindsay looked into Wu Jiang's eyes, his expression slightly heavy, and said softly, "I'm sorry." Wu Jiang laughed when she heard the apology. "What are you apologizing for?" What do you have to apologize to me for? You just found out about what Si Chunwen did. I already know that. Wu Jiang took a few steps forward. If you came here today to apologize on behalf of that woman, then forget it. Lin Zhe, don't let me look down on you. You didn't come here to apologize on her behalf. If you had known earlier. Enough. Lin Zhe. Wu Jiang raised her voice, looking straight at him. Can you stop taking responsibility for yourself? Also, don't say things like you didn't take good care of me because of your own carelessness. Hearing those words made me feel sick. I've already pretended that the past never happened. I've been trying to get along with you. I also beg you not to bother me anymore. Lin Zhe, when I was 17, the person I liked the most was you. I still remember your rejection at that time. Si Chunwen said you liked me. What if you really liked me now? The past is over. Stop saying meaningless apologies. I'm not the type of person who will immediately run after someone who gives her a little sweetness. And you're not the type of person who humbly apologizes for someone else's mistakes. Stop it. Lin Zhe. After saying these words, Wu Jiang turned around and walked into the stairs. 17-year-old Wu Jiang fell in love with 24-year-old Lin Zhe. Loving him alone and bravely, without anyone knowing. The silent love of youth was like a pouring rain, extinguishing the fire in Wu Jiang's heart. Those feelings were drowned in the rain without a trace. Without a trace. She once thought that Lin Zhe was the only oasis in the desert of her heart. The fleeting light of time. The gentle sunlight, the desires in her heart turned out to be just an illusion. The things she had been happily expecting had never actually happened. Wu Jiang didn't know how long it took to remove that illusion. She began to indulge in the years of debauchery, seeking joy in the world of luxury. She didn't know how many years had passed. And now, the pure young man in her eyes had finally broken the illusion and become a reality. But for Wu Jiang now, it was still far away in the end. Everything would pass, no matter what. It would pass, let alone someone like her who never looked back. She never stopped to rest. Just like that, it slowly passed. Wu Jiang felt like she was like a reception machine today. Just after meeting Lin Zhe, she bumped into Zhou Qi. Zhou Qi was sitting on a swing reading the script. When he heard the sound of the door opening, he looked over. He was wearing a pair of square gold-rimmed glasses, making his facial features look more sturdy and strong. But Wu Jiang felt that there was a kind of air of a defeated scholar. Wu Jiang asked him, "What are you doing?" Zhou Qi pushed up his glasses, put the script in his hand aside, leaned back in the rocking chair and said, "Reading the script." Wu Jiang heard this and remembered the resources she had introduced to Zhou Qi. "How was the audition today?" "Pretty good," Zhou Qi said nonchalantly, his eyes still fixed on Wu Jiang. "Have you eaten yet?" Wu Jiang turned her head to ask. Zhou Qi answered honestly, "No. Just in time. I haven't eaten either. I ordered takeout. Let's eat together." Zhou Qi replied, "Okay." Wu Jiang took out the cans of beer she had bought a few days ago, opened one for herself, and conveniently opened one for Zhou Qi. When the takeout arrived, Wu Jiang had already drunk 2 cans. Zhou Qi sat beside her and looked at her, not stopping her. She didn't say anything, just sat on the carpet, sipping her beer. Wu Jiang sat down to eat her bowl of char siu rice. And halfway through, she continued to drink her beer. The alcohol started to take over her head, and her consciousness became hazy. She turned her head and asked the man sitting beside her, her eyes slightly hazy, "Zhou Qi, do you have someone you like?" Zhou Qi turned her head to look at her. Her face was red, her eyes were also hazy. Her whole person was stupid, no longer had the usual sharpness. He took a sip of wine himself, then answered her, "Yes." Wu Jiang laughed when he heard this. "You men, you are all the same." She sat up, intending to use her hand to touch his forehead. Her vision was hazy, her whole person also staggered. Her finger pointed straight at his mouth. Warm, soft, and moist. Wu Jiang quickly withdrew her hand. She used too much force, immediately falling onto the carpet, her mouth still mumbling, "If you already have someone you like, why did you come to sleep with me? You are so bad." Chu Chi heard this and had a headache. He couldn't help but laugh. He didn't want to say at this time that the person he liked was her. Talking about liking someone to someone who was drunk and not sober was really a headache. But Wu Jiang didn't think so. She didn't feel like she was drunk. She covered her chest and said, "Chu-chi, tell me, is it possible that I won't like anyone anymore?" She spoke as tears kept flowing down. Her voice choked. "I feel like I can't anymore. My heart is empty. You know?" Chu-chi looked at her lying on the carpet. His heart suddenly stirred. He leaned down, took her hand and placed it on his chest. A kiss fell. In the quiet room, the sound of beer falling to the ground rang out. The two of them leaned very close to each other. Zhou-Qi even pressed against Wu Jiang, his hot breath blowing on her face. Warm. Wu Jiang looked at Zhou-Qi, smiled gently. Her finger pointed at his forehead and then his nose. "Did I say you're handsome?" Wu Jiang's voice was sticky, making Zhou-Qi feel itchy. Even the place she touched on his face also went numb. Zhou-Qi said softly, "No." Wu Jiang nodded, her expression as if she understood. Her hand was about to pull back when he grabbed it tightly. She looked at the two hands that were tightly clasped together and couldn't help but laugh. Her eyes curved. Her smile was full. She raised her other hand to lift his face, gently raised her head, and kissed him gently. Zhou-Qi was stunned. The girl's soft tongue touched his teeth. He opened his mouth slightly. The soft tongue immediately crept into his mouth, touching the tip of his tongue. Zhou-Qi unconsciously protected her head, then deepened the kiss. The two of them entangled. The clear liquid flowed from the corner of her mouth. A seductive scent spread between the two of them. Zhou-Qi reached out to wipe it away, his voice a little hoarse. "It's wet." He paused for a moment, his eyes filled with affection. "Is it wet down there?" Wu Jiang was drunk, and directly released his hand. Her two hands wrapped around his neck, pulling the distance between the two of them closer. She smiled and said with her lips moving, "Don't you know right away if you touch it?" Zhou-Qi laughed at this, the smile reaching the bottom of his eyes. This woman was a fairy. Even the most innocent scene became vivid and seductive in her hands. He was not someone who did not understand romance. A beauty had already spoken. How could he dare to let her down? Dying under the peonies, being a ghost was also romantic. Zhou-Qi had stripped Wu Jiang of her clothes in just a moment. She was already white. The light shining on her made her skin transparent. Her long black hair was loose. Her face flushed from the wine made her even more charming and captivating. Her eyes seemed to be filled with countless sparkling stars. But between her eyebrows, there was an innocent look, just like a fairy who didn't know about the world and had fallen into the forbidden land of sex. Confusing a mortal like him who didn't know what the rules were. If this was a game of gambling, Zhou-Qi would lose everything but was still willing. He seemed to accept defeat, sighed, and in a few steps, threw his clothes aside, mixing them with hers. He directly pulled her back, spreading her legs and placing them on his hips. That deep, private place was only for him to explore. The dense forest had just experienced a heavy rain. The soft fur was wet by the water. The tips of the fur still clearly hung with tears, not yet falling. Zhou-Qi licked his lower lip, saying, "It's wet." His voice was a bit hoarse, and it was hard to describe the charm. Wu Jiang heard him speak and felt her body's fluids flowing out. But none of it escaped Zhou-Qi's eyes. He witnessed the soft girl squirting, seeing the water slowly flowing down to a small hole that no one would notice. Zhou-Qi considered himself to have a wealth of experience in love affairs. But he had never thought of using a woman's chrysanthemum. And at that moment, when the dew soaked her chrysanthemum, his heart suddenly stirred. He wanted to taste the taste of that place, fill every corner of her body, possess her from body to mind, so that she would only have one choice, which was him. His hand subconsciously touched her anus. Wu Jiang was very sensitive. She felt that the place where Zhou-Qi touched seemed wrong. "Don't touch there, be good." Zhou-Qi patiently coaxed her, but his hand didn't stop moving. He placed his eyes on Wu Jiang, his voice deep, and called out, "Wu Jiang." Wu Jiang directly cried out. The man took advantage of her distraction as she called her name. Directly inserted his finger into her place. Come out, come out." Zhou-Qi only gently inserted his little finger. He naturally knew that that place couldn't be used blindly. It needed to be developed. He gently moved a few times, as if to satisfy his craving, then pulled out. He used his left hand to spread her rose petals, revealing her soft flower slit. Her pussy below was soaked with water. He directly inserted 2 fingers, At that moment, she made a sound. Zhou Qi's movements gradually quickened. Each time she pulled out there was a sound of water flowing. Even the little pearl above wasn't spared. In just a moment, she was brought to the top by him, her pussy again gushing out a large stream of water. "TSK, have you come yet?" Zhou Qi directly lay between her legs, his eyes fixed on her small pink mouth. Wu Jiang was still immersed in the climax of the previous moment. And the next moment, there was a soft and warm feeling touching her sensitive area. The girl lowered her head to look down. He pressed down on her private place. His tongue penetrated into that soft little mouth, not missing a single drop of water. The soft slit was also caressed by him. "Ah, no, Chu Chi. Don't." Wu Jiang cried out unconsciously, while her legs involuntarily tightened her grip on his head, not knowing if she was resisting or inviting. Chu Chi raised his head to look at the girl with a dazed expression, then continued his actions. The tip of his tongue touched the most sensitive spot in her private place. His teeth gently bit her little lips. Even her little pearl was gently bitten and sucked by him. Wu Jiang almost jumped off the carpet. Her legs unconsciously tightened his grip on her head. Her moans continued, her weak and soft moans, making the man even stronger. Wu Jiang was brought to the peak again in just a few minutes. The liquid from an unknown source shot out. The man hugged her soft thighs tightly and swallowed all the love juice. Wu Jiang gasped as she watched him get up from under her. His face was already wet with her liquid. His mouth still had a glistening moisture. He licked his lips right in front of her, then pressed down on her to share the taste in his mouth with her. His voice hoarse as he asked, "Is it good?" Without waiting for the girl to answer, the man's hips suddenly thrust hard. His erection seemed to break through all barriers, penetrating deep into her body to her flower core. Each of his thrusts was especially powerful, as if he wanted to penetrate her soul, becoming one with her. Zhou Qi, when Wu Jiang was about to reach his climax, suddenly pulled out. A feeling of emptiness filled her body. Wu Jiang looked at Zhou Qi in confusion. Her voice was a little choked. "Come in, I want, just a little more." She would have reached her climax. Zhou Qi said coldly, "What do you want?" "I want you to ride me." "Ha." The man chuckled softly. The erection was still standing proudly between his legs. It was just that it had long been wet by the love juice and was emitting a sparkling light. His words were even colder and more indifferent. "Kneel here, stick your ass up, show your pussy yourself, let me stab you." Wu Jiang frowned when she heard this. Her legs gently rubbed against Zhou Qi's legs, as if she was acting spoiled. "Please, stab me, please." The man did not budge. He raised his eyebrows. "Are you not listening?" Wu Jiang was afraid of that gaze. She could only obediently kneel in front of him. Her white fingers pulled open her labia, revealing a hole waiting to be taken care of. Chu Chi sighed. "So good." The next second, he knelt behind the girl, using his hand to lift his penis and slide it a few times on the gap. Unable to satisfy his thirst, Wu Jiang sobbed. "Push it in. So slutty. Grinding my pussy can't satisfy my craving." Chu Chi's words became even more vulgar, but Wu Jiang's body became even more sensitive when she heard these words. Her butt continuously pushed against his erection, wanting him to thrust into her. Immediately, Chu Chi directly touched Wu Jiang's fair hand and thrust into her hole. Wu Jiang climaxed directly after being thrust, and then he became more and more powerful. If it weren't for him grabbing her waist, she would have been knocked down by him. Her upper body was lying on the ground, her whole body still immersed in the aftertaste of pleasure. Chu Chi scolded her. "Nothing good." Immediately afterwards, he pulled her hand to the place where they were having sex. "Feel it. Your little baby is biting me tightly and not letting go." Wu Jiang no longer had the strength to deal with him. She could only accept the feeling of pleasure coming from her body wave after wave. Even the moans were swirling in her throat. Zhou Qi thrust a few times. Her eyes suddenly fell on the beer bottle beside her that she had not finished drinking. He had an idea, directly picked up the beer bottle. Cold. Ah, Wu Jiang didn't know what happened. The feeling of pleasure filled her head. Her body unconsciously erupted. She peed, was stabbed by Zhou Qi to pee. Zhou Qi had just poured the cold beer bottle directly onto the place where they were having sex. The stimulation of hot and cold made both of them lose control. Zhou Qi suppressed his desire, But Wu Jiang trembled. The pale yellow liquid sprayed out from her small mouth. She had been stabbed by him to pee. Witnessing this scene, all of Chu Chi's restraints went up in smoke. He forcefully thrust into Wu Jiang a few times, his semen directly shooting deep into her vagina. Wu Jiang was burned by the semen. Her suppressed urge to pee disappeared. She peed in front of Chu Chi. Chu Chi silently watched Wu Jiang lose control and release in front of him. Lost in it, and so did his heart. Today is Lidong, and it is snowing outside. Wu Jiang has just finished taking pictures of the outdoor scene and returned. When she got to the company from the parking lot, her head was already covered with a thin layer of snow. There are a few girls in the company who are from the south. They don't often see snow. This year is the first time they have seen snow. They even bought fried chicken and beer on purpose. The air is quite nice. Wu Jiang is from the north, so she is not surprised by this snow scene. She naturally has no feelings about the wind, flowers, snow, and moon. As soon as she entered the company's door, she smelled the scent of fried chicken wafting over from the reception desk. Miss Wu, you're back. Come eat fried chicken. Wu Jiang smiled at them, walked over, took a piece of chicken, said, thank you, and went into the office. She had just finished taking pictures today, and still had to edit the photos. It was also urgent. Wu Jiang might have to work overnight tonight to finish the work on time. Ever since the argument with old man Wu, Wu Jiang had not received any more calls from the Wu family. She felt relieved. After cleaning up her things, she turned on the computer and started working. Ellipsis. Cut. This scene is over. Gui Tian hurriedly handed Zhou Qi his coat. It was snowing lightly again today. The weather was a little colder. Zhou Qi was only wearing a thin coat. He had just recovered from his kneeling position. His whole body was stiff. Gui Tian helped him to a place with an electric heater. His limbs slowly regained feeling. He had been on the set for more than a month. His part was almost done. Tomorrow during the day would be the last scene. Zhou Qi here played the role of 9th Prince Rong Jing, who held the military and financial power of the country. The young emperor was his puppet. But as the emperor gradually grew up, this puppet began to have his own thoughts. He wanted to take back the power that belonged to him from his 9th uncle. The female lead, Si Qiao, is on the surface the #1 female sect leader in the martial arts world, calculating the hearts of the people in the world. But in reality she is the sharpest and fastest knife in the hands of Emperor Rongchu. He has a life-saving grace for Si Qiao, and Si Qiao must repay the grace with her life. Si Qiao appears to join the faction of the 9th Prince Rong Jing. But in reality she is collecting evidence of his crimes. Rong Jing admires her intelligence and bravery, and appreciates her talent and strategy. Since ancient times, heroes have had difficulty overcoming beauties. And it has always been like this. Rong Jing gradually likes this intelligent girl. Rong Jing's ending is destined to be tragic. Si Qiao presents evidence of Rong Jing's treason. That day, the 9th prince's mansion was completely destroyed, and the air is filled with the smell of blood. The strange thing is, Rong Jing did not resist, but instead handed over all his tiger talisman and financial resources before being executed. After Rong Jing's death, the truth is gradually revealed. The evidence of treason was just a trick of the 6th Prince Rong Yu. The storks fight, the fisherman benefits. Dung Duke is the one behind the scenes. As for his 9th uncle, he will forever be his 9th uncle. At the age of 14, he wore armor and went to war. The people of Chang'an all admired the young man. Dung So remembered when he was young. His 9th uncle taught him military strategy and swordsmanship. He remembered what his 9th uncle said to him. So, you must grow up well. 9th uncle will definitely give you the world. 9th uncle can protect a So for a while, but he cannot protect a So for a lifetime. A So must become someone who can protect himself. Every word and sentence that the 9th uncle said was sincere. The only one who didn't believe him was him. He thought, although the 9th uncle was his 9th uncle, he was only 3 years older than him, and was also a young boy but had already put himself in hell on earth. Plotting and scheming, just so that he could grow up safely, while he believed in people but was the only one who didn't believe the 9th uncle. Dung Can had been smart all his life. How could he not see through Tu Qiu's thoughts? He kept her by his side, just wanting to tell the little emperor through her that the 9th uncle was sincere. and that him loving her was a wrong move. A voluntary one. Who would have thought that the young man who was admired and praised by everyone in the capital would eventually die at the hands of the two people he loved the most? And even after his death, he would be branded as a traitor. Deng Can's life was truly a tragedy from beginning to end. When he was just born, his father and mother were killed by evil people. The eldest brother ascended the throne at a young age. On one hand had to deal with the conspiracies in the court. On the other hand still had to take care of him growing up. The eldest brother was like a father. He always remembered the last wish of the emperor, that he must support Deng So for the rest of his life. He had to swear that he would never betray or cause trouble. He had to live a life of loyalty and kindness. He did it. This life, considered not letting anyone down. The ending of the film was also a tragedy. The female lead calculated the hearts of people in the world. But the only one she did not foresee was that the life-saving grace that year was not the emperor admired by thousands, but Deng Can, whom she indirectly killed. She loved the wrong person, and also hated the wrong person. On the coronation day, Tuku drank poison and committed suicide. Emperor Rongchu finally regained his great power, but he always remembered the days when his ninth uncle took him horseback riding and shooting arrows, made him fly like a bamboo dragon, secretly took him out of the palace to play. He also often thought about that girl. She smiled softly under the moonlight. She said how could she not repay the life-saving grace? From the beginning, he was wrong, but fortunately, in the end, he became a virtuous king. It's just that his life was not a wife and no children. Lonely all his life. Zhou Qi finished reading the rest of the script and then cleaned up a bit. He wanted to go back to the hotel to rest well. Prepare for tomorrow's filming. He sat in the back seat of the caretaker's car, his whole body buried in a black fur coat. He looked at his phone. His WeChat chat messages with Wu Jiang were still from last night. This woman never took the initiative. Only when he sought her out to talk, she would reply to him a few sentences. He sighed. In the end still couldn't resist. Called her. The call was connected very quickly. Hello. Zhou Qi heard Wu Jiang's voice. The fatigue of the whole day instantly disappeared. There was no voice from the other side, only the man's sigh. Wu Jiang was busy at a crucial moment. A little impatiently said, "If you don't want to talk, I'll hang up." "Don't hang up, I just finished work." Wu Jiang replied, his hands moving non-stop. Zhou Qi could hear the noise from Wu Jiang's side, guessing that she was busy with work. According to his previous habits, he would say, "Good night," and then end the call. But this time, he was a bit stubborn and didn't want to do that. He wanted to pursue his heart's desire. His voice was a bit hoarse. "I'll finish my role tomorrow." Wu Jiang was stunned when he heard this. Really, the two of them hadn't seen each other for a long time. "I'll finish my role and come back. You can treat me to dinner." "Okay." Zhou Qi paused for a moment. His gaze fell on the car window. Snowflakes were falling. "These days, have you found anyone else?" Wu Jiang didn't understand. "Someone else? Who?" Zhou Qi felt happy. His voice carried a laugh. "Nothing." "All right, Zhou Qi. I really thought you were the kind of woman who would eat anything on an empty stomach. Because you're on a business trip and can't satisfy my needs, I can't help but selectively go find other male stars. Is that what you think of me?" Zhou Qi heard the other side getting angry and laughed out loud. "No." Lindsay heard his light laughter and turned his head. He didn't mean anything else. This man just rarely laughed like that. Usually, it was just a little perfunctory. Now, it was really rare. He was a little curious. "It's obvious. I really meant it." Zhou Qi softly comforted him. All right, sorry," he sighed. "I thought wrong of you. I'm sorry. When I get back, I'll apologize to you." "Okay, how do you want to apologize?" "Whatever you want." "Really?" Zhou Qi patiently said. "Really? That's fine." Wu Jiang looked at the time. "I'm busy. I won't talk to you anymore." "Okay," Chu Qi replied. He really wanted to say a few more words to her. He pinched the bridge of his nose, hiding the seriousness in his voice. "You came to see me one last time?" The dungeon was dirty, but it did not dirty the man at all. His white clothes were already stained with blood. Countless whip marks covered his body. His face was pale, but his expression was calm. His whole person did not fit this dungeon. Seeing his straight appearance, his noble temperament, Who could associate him with the treason of the ninth prince? Si Qiao saw Rong Jing, wanting to say something but stopped. Don't you hate me? He smiled gently. His eyes were bright like the moonlight. His voice was soft like jade. Everyone is only for their master. Miss C doesn't need to worry. Hearing him say that, she trembled. Before, he always called her Qiao Qiao. Miss C's words had already pulled the distance between them further. The intentional distance was as if the good things before were like flowers in a mirror. The moon below, illusory. Then your highness. Let's go. Goodbye. Wait. Rong Jing raised his eyes to look at her. The imperial court is full of swords and sabers. Unlike the vast rivers and lakes. After we part, I hope Miss C will take care of herself in the future. Si Qiao heard this, and her eyes immediately turned red. She recalled that year, the apricot blossoms gently blooming in the rain. He was wearing a golden outfit standing by the riverbank. He personally pinned the hairpin he had given her. His voice low. I cannot block out the entire sky. But I swear, as long as you stay by my side for one day, I will definitely protect you completely. Heaven and earth are witnesses. The sun and moon can see. If there is even the slightest lie, I, Rong Jing, will die a terrible death. She asked him softly, her voice choked. You really loved me, right? Rong Jing smiled lightly, his eyes as deep as a lake. Calm. The past is like smoke and clouds. There is no need to mention it again. He did not give her an answer, but it seemed like he had said it all. You, Miss C, please come back. That day, the ninth Prince Dung Can committed treason. The evidence was clear. He was torn apart by 5 horses. To set an example, the air in Chang'an City was filled with the smell of blood. Heavy snow flew, covering all the bloodstains. It was clear that he had committed crimes beyond measure. Without loyalty or righteousness. Why did her heart still ache so much? Sometimes she wondered, why even when he died, they didn't leave him an intact corpse? The oath was like nothingness. Even when achieved, it was difficult to avoid the joke of fate. After that day, the storytellers on the streets of Chang'an had another new story. They told the story of the traitor who committed heinous crimes eloquently. When he came to the end of his execution, the listeners were satisfied, cursing, happy. The storyteller hated the crime. Heaven's separation is clear. It's truly retribution. A good death. A good death. However, no one remembered that in the city of Chang'an there was a young man. Elegant and carefree, naturally talented, using a good silver spear, practicing good martial arts, to quell the chaos. At the age of 14 he put on battle armor, and went to the battlefield. Cut. This scene is over. Rong Jing is over. Zhou Qi wore the down jacket that Gui Tian gave him, raised his hand to receive the flowers from the crew, and smiled lightly. Thank you, director. Thank you, everyone. Zhou Qi took a photo with the crew, posted a post on social media, immediately returned to the hotel to get his luggage, and went straight to the airport. The flight was at 4 in the afternoon. Zhou Qi arrived at the airport at 3 o'clock. He woke up at 2 in the morning to put on makeup. Started filming at 4 in the morning. Filmed until noon, and was busy cleaning up, only having a quick breakfast. He wasn't famous, even without a mask. Not many people recognized him. The girls who stared at him were simply because he was eye-catching. Zhou Qi got on the plane and then put on a blindfold to sleep. Gui Tian originally wanted to talk to him about the next schedule on the plane. But seeing how tired Zhou Qi was, he thought, it wouldn't be too late to wake up and talk. Zhou Qi slept very soundly. He was woken up by Gui Tian. When he opened his eyes, his whole body was still a bit hazy. His eyes seemed to be filled with water, making Gui Tian also dazed. Zhou Qi looked up. The plane was almost empty. He picked up his luggage and got off the plane. Gui Tian didn't expect that, after meeting so many handsome men and beautiful women, today he would be dazed by Zhou Qi. A big man, he knocked his head, feeling that he had been single for too many years. Even looking at men also found them handsome. He remembered something again, called out to Zhou Qi from behind. Although you're not famous now, you still have to take precautions. Wear a mask. Zhou Qi nodded, reached out to take the mask and put it on. Familiarly put on the hood. His whole body became cold. He turned his head. I have something to do later. Just send the schedule to my phone. Okay. You've also worked hard these days. Go home early and rest. Okay, Gui Tian kept agreeing, feeling like he was Zhou Qi's employee, while he was like a big boss arranging work for him. Really, before he could get angry, he had already disappeared into the crowd. Zhou Qi had just gone down the elevator, looking around at the couples. His heart was really sour. He also didn't know when Wu Jiang, that woman, would be able to understand and come out to pick him up once. But before that she still had to become his wife. This was even more difficult. After all, Wu Jiang was still treating him with a cold attitude. He was a bit wronged. Ellipsis. Wu Jiang slept in her room for a day. The sudden part-time job made her whole body tired. The fatigue reminded her that she was no longer the 20-year-old girl with endless energy. Thinking of this, she obediently went to wash her face, sat on the sofa and put on a facial mask. Zhou Qi opened the door and entered the house. Wu Jiang had just finished putting on a facial mask. Her face was fair and tender under the light. The man's shoulders still had snow that had not yet melted. A gentle shake and it melted away. He wanted to go forward and hug her, but the cold air from outside reminded him that he could not do so. Wu Jiang took 2 steps forward, standing a meter away from him, looking at him, not saying anything. Zhou Qi paused for a moment, threw his coat on the ground, and stepped forward slightly in surprise, reaching out to hug the small figure into his arms. He buried his face in her shoulder, his voice filled with unspeakable resentment. I missed you so much. You didn't take the initiative to look for me. Wu Jiang stood still in place. She was completely stunned. To be exact, she was confused by this sudden hug and ambiguity. She had actually had many different relationships, but she had never experienced such a sudden hug and such sincere feelings. Wu Jiang never thought that she was someone who was easily provoked by others. But at this moment, she was confused. Her heart was confused by this hug. Thump, thump, so fast it was unbelievable. So fast it was strange. She heard herself speak, her voice filled with confusion, even stuttering slightly. Then, next time I will take the initiative to find you. His Adam's apple rolled down. After a while, his voice carried an unconcealed joy, saying, okay. Wu Jiang suddenly pushed Zhou Qi away, took a few steps back and glanced at him. You're too much. Zhou Qi leaned over to look at Wu Jiang. Her eyes were wide open, pointing at him with her thumb, her face angry, as if she was angry with herself for not being strong enough. He took a few steps forward. The light shone on his eyes. There was warmth and sparkle in his eyes. How can it be considered too much? As he spoke, he reached out to touch Wu Jiang's head and face. Like this, or like this. He paused for a moment, his hands placed on her shoulders. His face moved closer, stopping just before touching her red lips. Or, like this. Zhou Qi was just teasing her. After he finished speaking, he stood up and prepared to pack his things. Suddenly someone grabbed his wrist. Zhou Qi turned his head to look back. Wu Jiang's angry expression had disappeared. A mocking smile appeared on her face. Zhou Qi, do you like me already? Before Zhou Qi could say anything, Wu Jiang continued. You like me? What do you like about me? Just because we slept together a few times that you like me? She paused for a moment, her voice becoming sharper. Or is it because you've tasted sweetness that you like me even more? The smile in Zhou Qi's eyes gradually turned cold, her voice cold and deep. Do you think I'm like that? Or else? Wu Jiang looked at him. A gigolo is just a gigolo. Once you have feelings, it's no longer interesting. After Wu Jiang finished speaking the second half of the sentence, for a moment she didn't know if these words were directed at the person in front of her or herself. Wu Jiang. Zhou Qi gritted his teeth. The joy that had just arisen from the bottom of his heart was doused with cold water by the woman in front of him. As if he had been slapped. His whole heart ached. You don't know what to do. After the man finished speaking, he gently pushed Wu Jiang's hand that was holding his wrist away. Then picked up the clothes and suitcase that had fallen on the ground and walked out. The sound of the door closing brought Wu Jiang back to reality. She recalled the argument just now and felt that she was sick and crazy. She angrily kicked the carpet, then sat down on the sofa. She had become like this a long time ago, like a person locked in a cage. Others couldn't get in, she couldn't get out. All these years, she had lived like a monster, afraid of others approaching her, and afraid that she had the intention to approach others. Those who approached her were all chased away by her. Her compassion and desire to approach others were suppressed by herself. Have you ever felt it? The feeling of being abandoned since childhood. Do you understand? Since she was little, she felt that her birth was a mistake. Her father was out playing. Her mother was crying alone in front of her. Her mother blamed her for not being a boy. She hated that she was not a boy. Her mother said her father did not love her. Her father did not come home just because she gave birth to her. She always knew. Her mother always wanted a son who could inherit the Wu family's fortune. When mother was young and had no children, she had no choice but to adopt Lindsay. Her appearance was simply her mother's hope, her mother's everything, but heaven did not follow her will. She was a daughter. In mother's eyes, she was nothing good. Father did not return home because of her. Father loved Lindsay because of her. Father was cold to mother also because of her. She knew that the person mother hated the most was not the unfaithful father, but her, mother's daughter. Therefore, even if mother died, she had to die in front of her, so that she would see the sins she had committed. Wu Jiang forever remembered what mother said before committing suicide: "You are just a comet. No one will love you. Everyone will abandon you. Giving birth to you is the thing I regret the most in my life." A comet. The words of a dying person are usually good words. But this sentence became a joke in front of her. At that time Wu Jiang did not believe it. She was just sad for a long time. No matter what, Lindsay treated her well. Even when everyone else disliked her, Lindsay still liked her. Lindsay meant to Wu Jiang the only beacon that a lost person in the dark could rely on. He was her beacon, and also her all hope. When she was 17, her hope had killed her with his own hands. Wu Jiang, I don't like you, don't like me anymore. To me, your feelings are just a burden. This rejection seemed to confirm what her mother said. The people she loved one by one did not love her. The people she wanted one by one left her. She was a comet of fate. Just like her birth was also denied by others. Zhou Qi's face was gloomy. The joy that filled his heart was trampled on mercilessly. As if he was just a piece of shit that was not worthy of being loved. As soon as he stepped out of the hotel door, he scolded himself. Zhou Qi, you really have no willpower. He angrily stopped and turned back to the hotel. The elevator was still on the top floor, but Zhou Qi could not wait another second. He threw his luggage in the lobby and ran up the stairs. When he reached Wu Jiang's room door, sweat was running down his forehead. The white t-shirt inside was already soaked. He was panting, trembling as he took out the room card from his pocket and leaned in through the door. He glanced at Wu Jiang, who was curled up on the sofa, her head bowed, her face buried in her knees. Hearing the sound of the door opening, she raised her head in surprise to look at him. Zhou Qi threw her coat on the ground, closed the door casually, and walked towards Wu Jiang, panting. Each step was extremely slow, but each step was extremely determined. He laughed, self-deprecating. You're right. I like you. Zhou Qi paused for a moment, knelt in front of Wu Jiang, looked into her eyes and said, Do you know where I first met you? It wasn't at Si Chun Wan's party, nor was it a so-called plan. It was the day I returned to the country. Wang Qiu, the owner of the bar that didn't fall into the dust, invited me to drink to welcome me back. At that time, you were drinking the bartender's wine, wearing a red dress and smiling and talking softly with the bartender. Do you think that day only the bartender was attracted to your gaze? No, there was also me standing far away. Wang Qiu told him. You are Wu Jiang, the little girl of the Wu family. He touched his nose and continued. He told me a lot of bad things about you, but I didn't listen to any of it. Wu Jiang, cousin Zhou, of the Zhou company. I was exiled to America at the age of 18, kicked out of the heart of the Zhou family. Every day in America, I told myself I had to come back. I wanted to become the master of the Zhou family. 10 years. It took me 10 years to come back here. To stand here. I know what I have to do now is not to pursue you, and even less to join the so-called entertainment industry, but to clean up the mess of the Zhou family, to run everything. But I have returned to the Zhou family. I am in meetings. I sign contracts. I work. I interact with others. All the time and everywhere I think about you. Wu Jiang. Wu Jiang. I heard before that you don't like business people. That they are all calculating and not sincere. That's why I used a lowly identity. One that I didn't even value. to approach you. You know that we met on purpose from the beginning. But my heart of wanting to see you has always been real. I'll give myself a year. If in this year, you don't like me, I'll give up. I know that a year may be very short for others, and may not show my sincerity. But a year for me, for the Zhou family, for those who are waiting for me to return to America, is truly the longest time I can spend. Truly my greatest effort. The man's eyes were filled with sincerity. His eyebrows furrowed into the character, Kawa, his voice trembling. Actually, I don't want it to be this fast. I want it to be slow. We progress slowly, but I discovered that feelings don't follow rules, nor do they follow order. He took her hand and placed it on his heart. I can't control myself anymore. Wu Jiang. The man looked into her eyes, smiled lightly. Trust me this once. Give me a chance. Okay. Wu Jiang struggled to break free from Zhou Qi's hand that was holding her chest. She calmed down and said seriously, actually, it's embarrassing to say it. I've never had a serious relationship. Nor do I crave love. Everyone's interest in me is just a new feeling for 3 days. I have absolutely no way of knowing whether you are now 3 days, or half a month, or how much longer. As you can see, I'm really quite a selfish person, denying your sincerity for my own reasons. Wu Jiang looked into Zhou Qi's eyes, and added in a heavy voice, but, Zhou Qi, what's the point of sincerity? Precious is sincerity. Cheap is also sincerity. I have no right to judge you. But I know my own feelings. I really have feelings for you. But these feelings are too common. I hope you give me a chance. But after all, for me, a chance can't be given based on common feelings alone. What I mean, do you understand? The light in Zhou Qi's eyes flickered. He remained kneeling, his back still straight. He did not move at all, looking at her, listening to every word she said. Every word echoed in his heart, echoed in his ears. I understand, but you can't push me out of your life just because you like me. Yes, if you want, our relationship will still be the same as before. But, following Wu Jiang's pause, Zhou Qi's heart felt like it was being squeezed. She smiled. I will remember what you said in my heart, not pretend it never happened. I will try to like you, understand you. I will not ignore or suppress my feelings for you. Even before the words were finished, Zhou Qi was overjoyed, like a prisoner sentenced to life who suddenly found out he was free. He reached out to hug her. His legs were numb from holding the same position for too long. But he didn't care. His chin rested on her shoulder. His words carried obvious joy. Okay, I understand. I know. He repeated this over and over. His heart had never beaten so fast. In these few short minutes, he seemed to have returned from hell to heaven. All the panic turned into crazy joy in this moment. The mountains are heavy. The water is clear. The willows are dark. The flowers are bright. Another village. Wu Jiang didn't give him a door, but opened a window for him, allowing him to look into her world, allowing him to approach. This was enough. Enough. Zhou Qi and Wu Jiang went downstairs to have dinner. When they got downstairs, Zhou Qi remembered that he had left his luggage in the lobby. He told Wu Jiang to wait for him a moment. He went to make arrangements with the staff. Wu Jiang looked at Zhou Qi's back, wanting to laugh a little. It was the first time he saw Zhou Qi in such a hurry. When Zhou Qi finished, Wu Jiang was sitting on the sofa looking at him with a mocking gaze. Zhou Qi saw Wu Jiang wanting to lower her head to kiss her. But unfortunately there were quite a few people here, so he lowered his hat and pulled Wu Jiang out. Wu Jiang seemed to be intentionally punishing Zhou Qi. Knowing that he didn't like the smell of vermicelli noodles, he still dragged him to eat vermicelli noodles. Zhou Qi frowned as he walked in, but seeing that Wu Jiang was happy, he still endured his physiological discomfort and sat down. Wu Jiang ate a large bowl, while Zhou Qi only took a few bites. When the two of them returned to the hotel, Wu Jiang and Zhou Qi went to buy more food, then went upstairs. It was late at night, and the sky was already dark. Wu Jiang had just used the key card to open the door when he pressed her against the door. And immediately after, a kiss came, sweet, and still carrying the taste of the fruit candy he had just eaten. Surrounded her, he pushed her into the corner of the wall, greedily taking away her breath, her taste. Clank. The food he was holding in his hand fell to the ground. Immediately after, he gasped, leaned close to her ear and said, "Don't care. Then his big hand threw his coat to the ground and hurriedly took off her coat. The clothes of the two people fell everywhere along the kiss. The lights were not on. The dark room only relied on the neon light outside the window. The two of them stepped on the halo of light, step by step through the darkness. Entering the bedroom, he directly pressed her down on the bed. He covered her body. His hot breath rushed over. The kiss from forehead to nose finally fell on her red lips. His tongue entangled in her mouth, pulling her tongue to dance, mixing her breath into his. Then the kiss fell on her white neck. He used especially heavy force. Each deep kiss left a purple-red mark, as if it was his exclusive mark. With a swish sound, he released her whiteness, reaching out to knead her fullness. Following his movements, a weak moan came from her mouth. His eyes were misty. He held her in his arms. His voice low, still carrying a hoarseness tinged with lust. Take a bath. The warm stream of water fell from the top of their heads. Wu Jiang was so wet that she couldn't open her eyes. The man took advantage of this gap to directly place her legs on his hips. A hot kiss fell on her red lips. Her back was against the cold brick of the wall, and in front of her was the hot temperature of the man. He always liked to say dirty words when making love, but this time he was especially quiet. Wu Jiang was immersed in this quiet and passionate feeling. The next second, the hardness penetrated her, directly touching the depths of her heart. The unexpected feeling made her unable to restrain herself from crying out. Zhou Qi was also uncomfortable. All his nerves were tense. The girl under him was tightly sucking him in, not letting go. Zhou Qi curled his lips. His voice low. I haven't made love to you for a few days, and you've become so tight again. He hugged the girl up a little higher, and the hardness thrust deeper. He raised his eyebrows to look at her. Remember? Next, he suddenly pulled out, flipped the girl over, and penetrated her from behind. Ah! Zhou Qi pressed down on her waist, thrusting in and out one by one. The sound of her hips colliding resounded in the bathroom along with the water. The girl's soft moans came and went. Zhou Qi still hadn't had enough. His big hand directly slapped her butt. A deep red handprint was left on her fair skin. A little bigger. Wu Jiang didn't listen to him, even gritting his teeth to prevent himself from letting out a single moan. Zhou Qi knew what she meant, and directly chuckled, holding her from behind, in a position like he was holding a child to pee, while his hardness conveniently penetrated her. This time it was especially deep. Wu Jiang screamed out in orgasm. He carried her to the sink. The blurry mirror of the sink was wiped dry by him with a big hand, revealing the image of the two people having intercourse. The man rested his chin on the girl's shoulder, looked at the place where the two people were intertwined, and whispered in her ear, "Look at what I'm doing to you." Hearing this, Wu Jiang's eyes couldn't help but look at the mirror. His two big hands tightly held her legs, and the previously secret deep place was now completely exposed in the mirror. His purple and veined hardness penetrated the soft baby one by one, and a stream of water flowed along the place where the two people were intertwined and fell into the sink. This lewd scene made Wu Jiang even more sensitive. The little girl bit him tightly and wouldn't let go. Each of his thrusts was especially strong, as if wanting to penetrate her. She didn't know how many times she had reached orgasm in such a short time. She only knew that she was moving up and down in his arms. Zhou Qi was also about to come, the veins on her neck bulging. He unconsciously bit her shoulder. The strength below him became faster, stronger, deeper, wanting to penetrate her mouth, attacking her uterus. She moaned. The pain in her shoulder and the feeling below her body mixed together, pushing her to orgasm. The strong stream of fluid from her pussy stimulated his sensitive head. His testicles completely flooded her pussy. The girl clearly saw him pull out afterwards, her pussy flowing out a cloudy liquid, mixed with her body fluids and his semen. Wu Jiang's eyes were red. Wu Jiang has been busy promoting his new movie recently, flying all over the country, while Wang Qiu has also been busy with his work. The two have not seen each other for more than a month. In the past month, Wu Jiang has witnessed Zhou Qi's meteoric rise in popularity. Since his appearance, Zhou Qi has attracted a number of fans thanks to his appearance, plus his appearances on entertainment programs and advertising conferences. He is polite but also a bit distant, which fits the taste of today's young girls, and has also won quite a few fans. Of course, there are people who support him. And there are also people who criticize him. For example, there are currently some people who see Zhou Qi's meteoric rise. So they buy marketing accounts to smear him, saying that his acting is not good. He has personality problems, is arrogant, and other problems. One of the most influential rumors recently about Zhou Qi was that he used to be an artist of Tianqing Entertainment, and in order to advance, he tried to seduce Tianqing's future boss, Zhang Kaiwen. As a result, she directly kicked him out of Tianqing Entertainment, and in the end, she didn't know who she slept with to enter her current management company. And immediately after entering the company, she received a big project. When this news spread, there were quite a few people on Zhou Qi's Weibo criticizing him. But Zhou Qi didn't care much about this. After all, he entered the entertainment industry just to pursue his wife. Wu Jiang thought about this and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. She originally thought she had slept with a little fresh meat. But who would have thought it was the heir to the Zhou family's group? The Zhou family's group had countless subsidiaries, such as jewelry, high-end fashion, real estate, food, hotels, etc., and was truly a conglomerate. Fortunately, the Chu group has not yet entered the entertainment industry. Otherwise the entertainment industry would have to change its appearance. Wouldn't it become the Chu family's world? Knock knock knock, a knock on the door. Come in. Miss Wu, there are rumors online that Zhou Qi is your gigolo. The studio's phone is about to be called out. Wu Jiang was not surprised when he heard this news. No need to accept it. I'll deal with it later. Okay, Miss Wu, then I'll go to work first. Wu Jiang thought about calling Qin Fan to help check who spread the rumor. But then called someone else. Reporter Yin, are you busy right now? No, Miss Wu. Is there something wrong? Sorry for being so blunt. You must know about the recent rumors about me. Right, with that man named Zhou Qi. Yes, I just want to ask reporter Doan to help me check who spread the rumor. It's easy to talk about money. Miss O is too polite. I will inform you immediately when I have news. Very good, thank you for your hard work. As soon as Wu Jiang hung up the phone, Zhou Qi's phone rang. Hello, have you seen the news online? I saw it. It said that you were my gigolo. Wu Jiang raised his eyebrows. The man on the other end of the line chuckled. Actually, I think what they said is right. After all, our relationship is almost like a gigolo. After all, I eat from you and live with you. Wu Jiang felt that since she met Zhou Qi, her personality had also become more mature. Hearing him say that, her temples also ached. What gigolo? Before, the press said that I change boyfriends like changing clothes. Said that there is not a single male artist in the company that has not been through me. Said that I finally had a fiancé but that my marriage was ruined by myself. Now, I still have to bear the reputation of being a gigolo. She changed her sitting position, her hands supporting her chin. I, Wu Jiang, have a face if I want to have a face. A body if I want to have a golden figure. A body if I want to have a body if I want to have a body. Handsome men are not attracted by my charm, but are kept by me. Do you think this is a compliment for me? Zhou Qi heard Wu Jiang's tone getting louder and louder, and couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. He tapped the table lightly, looked at Gui Tian who was calling him to the stage, and spoke softly into the phone. All right, don't be angry anymore. Anyway, I was attracted by your beauty and came here to warm up Miss Wu. Right, I've already started here. I'll call you back later. Wu Jiang said, and hung up the phone. Reporter Doan was really fast. In just one call, he sent the information of the person spreading the rumor to Wu Jiang's mailbox. Wu Jiang opened the email and saw that person's information, Chen Luoxi, and behind Chen Luoxi was Zhang Kaiwen. She guessed correctly. The person behind this dark curtain was Qin Fan's stepmother, her best friend from college, Zhang Kaiwen. This woman was really more annoying than dog shit. Wu Jiang had once doubted her ability to read people. After all, her two best friends from college, Zhang Kaiwen and Si Chunwen, both became mistresses of rich men after graduating from college. Zhang Kaiwen became the mistress of Qin Fan's father, Wu Jiang's father's good friend. Si Chunwen was even more daring. This woman directly slept with Wu Jiang's father, and now she was still waiting for her brother's bed. Knowing them, Wu Jiang was unlucky for 8 lifetimes. Long time no see. Wu Jiang looked at the woman in front of her. She was wearing designer clothes from head to toe. Even the handbag in her hand was a new model from this year. Completely different from the simple girl from before. Zhang Kaiwen took off her hat and sunglasses and ordered a cup of coffee. Tell me, what do you want from me? Wu Jiang smiled. It's nothing. There's been some news about me on the internet recently, saying that I keep male artists. Oh, Zhang Kaiwen kept his face calm. I told you if you like to hang out with male artists, then do it secretly. How did it get exposed? Wu Jiang saw the woman's expression of, it doesn't matter, and sarcastically smiled. It's all thanks to you. She imitated the flattering tone of people in the industry. Now Zhang Kaiwen is no longer the Zhang Kaiwen of the past. Now if someone doesn't like you, just by raising his hand, he can make them not know how they died. You mean, this is my doing? Whether you did it or not, you know best. I advise you, stop. Wu Jiang raised her eyebrows. Her tone was a little cold, but the corners of her mouth smiled. Her eyes were full of challenge. Zhang Kaiwen looked surprised. Are you threatening me? She smiled gently, took a sip of coffee, and continued. Threatening people also requires some capital. Miss Wu is sitting here wanting to do business without capital. Am I stupid? Wu Jiang heard this, also smiled. She reached out to stroke her hair. Zhang Kaiwen, if you don't tell me, I'll forget. She took out a stack of photos from her bag. Is this enough? Zhang Kaiwen immediately took out the stack of photos. His face instantly paled. Mr. Qin doesn't want the future owner of Tiancheng to be a woman like this. Right? Wu Jiang raised his eyebrows to look at her expression, not wanting to miss out on any of the charm. I have as many photos as you want, and as many hot scenes as you want. Moreover, I like to share. If I accidentally share them out, how can I take them back? After Wu Jiang finished speaking, she clicked her tongue twice, looking at her newly done nails under the light. The situation between the two of them immediately reversed. Zhang Kaiwen, have you thought it through? Zhang Kaiwen regained his composure, pushing the stack of photos towards Wu Jiang. All right, Wu Jiang, Miss Wu, you're really good. She paused for a moment. You didn't care about these rumors before, but now a small male artist can make Miss Wu take action. You're really amazing. Wu Jiang understood the deep meaning of the woman in front of her, and directly said, no matter how powerful, it is not as good as Miss Zhang. She put her phone in her pocket. I still have work to do. I'll go first. Zhang Kaiwen, goodbye. Wu Jiang had just left the coffee shop when Xiao Song's phone rang, and she hurriedly told her to check Weibo. Wu Jiang was confused. She hung up the phone, then opened Weibo to read. The top news, Zhou Qi. Please do not disturb. She was a little confused. What do you mean by please do not disturb? Wu Jiang clicked to read the Weibo that Zhou Qi had posted 10 minutes ago. I admire Miss Wu Jiang's talent, ability, and personality, and even more hope to develop a further relationship with her. Currently still in the process of pursuing her. I hope everyone will give her some space. After Zhou Qi posted an article on Weibo, a lot of people suddenly appeared to support the couple Zhou Qi and Wu Jiang. Some even combined Wu Jiang's behind-the-scenes videos when she filmed for other stars with videos of Zhou Qi attending events. The woman holding the camera smiled lightly. After the two looked at each other, the man couldn't help but lower his head and smile lightly. A handsome man and a beautiful woman. They looked very compatible with each other. Zhou Qi scrolled through Weibo and saw a photo collage of the two made by fans. He showed it to Wu Jiang. Wu Jiang was lying on the sofa with a mask on. When she saw the collage, she kicked Zhou Qi and still kept the mask on her face, laughing and saying, can you not be so shameless? Every time Zhou Qi saw fans' collage photos and videos of the two, if Wu Jiang was around, he would drag her to watch it. And if they weren't together, he would share it on WeChat. If there was a good collage, he would personally like and comment on it. Now, fans would post collages of him and Wu Jiang for Zhou Qi to like and comment on. Wu Jiang didn't realize that this man had such a childish side before. Zhou Qi, how old are you? Zhou Qi didn't raise her head, didn't open her eyes, and just stared at her phone. 28. Wu Jiang kicked him again. 28 years old and still childish. The man put down his phone and looked at her. I promise you, I won't be childish anymore. Wu Jiang was clearly startled, kicked him again and sat up. So childish. She threw the mask into the trash can and turned to go to the bathroom to wash her face. Zhou Qi watched Wu Jiang's back, knowing that she turned away to avoid embarrassment. But the light in his eyes still dimmed a little, just like the light from the phone screen on his lap changed from bright to dark. The sound of running water broke the silence in the room. Wu Jiang washed her face with cold water. Her whole body was a little more awake. She looked in the mirror and saw her face. Not delicate enough, not cute enough, just like herself, not thoughtful enough, not gentle enough. Zhou Qi was someone who had been by her side for quite a long time. If he had said he had other intentions before, she could still believe it. But now, she was by his side, living a life that did not belong to her, and had to worry about another world full of strange things and changes. What did he want? Wanted her? She pointed at herself. Wanted the person everyone had abandoned. The drops of water on her face slowly flowed down, wetting her collarbone. The drops of water continued to flow down along her collarbone and left clear traces on her loose nightgown. Like a painting stained with color. Just like her heart, being drawn and engraved by him at will. Leaving behind memories, leaving behind emotions. New story update. Wu Jiang wiped his face, using his hand to gather his wet hair back to reveal his fair forehead. She opened the bathroom door and saw Zhou Qi sitting on the sofa. His back was wide and straight, but his back was lonely. His fair ankles were exposed. His feet were on the carpet. The veins were prominent. His features were sharp. Are you angry? Wu Jiang asked him. Zhou Qi turned to look at her, his eyes still carrying a bit of loneliness. Without light, his voice was low, slightly resentful. No. Wu Jiang walked over and sat beside him. Are you okay? Zhou Qi was not like usual when Wu Jiang sat beside him. He would hold her in his arms. He still kept the same sitting position as before. I was just thinking about what to do. I know because of me you went to find Si Chun Wan. He lowered his head, his voice even softer. You don't like me. Me being by your side only bothers you. He sighed. I'm so useless. Wu Jiang's hand that was about to stroke his head stopped in midair. In recent days, she had seen quite a bit of information about the Zhou group, and she knew that what he said was true. Being crushed by his biological brother and not getting his father's favor and kicked out of the Zhou group when he was only 18. He had been living abroad on his own. For 10 years, he had silently collected the shares of the Zhou group into his own hands. Becoming the real ruler of the Zhou group, such a proud and ambitious man could actually show weakness in front of her. Worrying about her matters, apart from her pride being satisfied to the fullest. How could she not be moved? How could she not be moved? Wu Jiang continued her movements, also sighing along with him, reaching out to stroke his head. I don't think you're bothering me. Zhou Qi raised his head when he heard this. The light in his eyes lit up again. Wu Jiang looked into his jet black eyes, somewhat reluctant but also like surrendering, saying, I don't hate you either. Zhou Qi blinked, as if trying to distinguish whether what was happening was a dream or reality. He reached out to touch her face. Really? Yeah, really. Wu Jiang grabbed his hand. I quite like you too. After she finished speaking, she smiled awkwardly. Her whole body seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Immediately, a kiss fell. The man closed his eyes, his long eyelashes casting shadows under his eyes. Even his breathing became heavier. Wu Jiang, following his strength, was pressed down on the sofa by him. This kiss made people confused. 3 days ago, at the bar that doesn't fall dust, Wang Qiu saw Zhou Qi coming. Didn't say anything, just poured himself a drink. Without asking, he knew what he was thinking. He asked Xiao Lu to make him a glass of whiskey and sat next to Zhou Qi. Wasn't young Master Zhou still rejoicing in his fame as a big star a few days ago? Why did he come here to buy wine late at night today? Zhou Qi glanced at him, ignored him, and continued drinking his wine. Seeing you, I know that Miss Wu rejected you, Wang Qiu said naturally, pouring himself another glass of wine. Zhou Qi, we've known each other for so many years. You also know me. I'm a love expert. I've had no fewer girlfriends than the women you've met. What do you want to say? Seeing you fail like this, covered in injuries, as your good brother, I'll give you an idea. Wang Qiu put his hand on Zhou Qi's shoulder. Listen, clack. Zhou Qi put his glass of wine down on the table. Listen. Wang Qiu changed his sitting position. Zhou Qi, your advantages are good looks, good background, money, you know your own personality. As for Wu Jiang, good looks, good background, and money, finding a boyfriend with good personality, good looks, good background, and money is too easy. So, saying that makes it seem like you're not outstanding. Wang Qiu sneered twice, touching his chin. You should know what Wu Jiang lacks the most. Everyone knows that although Wu Jiang comes from a wealthy family, her family isn't very happy. Women, they all crave to be loved and cared for by others. Zhou Qi glanced at him. Nonsense. Wang Qiu immediately held back Zhou Qi, who was about to stand up. Don't be in a hurry. Listen to me finish. I think you have to put aside your pride, face, and strength, so that she can see a completely different, but extremely sincere, Chu Qi. Do you understand? Sometimes, only truth and gentleness can touch others' hearts. This time, Zhou Qi really couldn't listen anymore, and stood up and walked out. This man was just saying a bunch of empty words, over and over again, simply telling him to use soft strings to tie him up. Just thinking about the soft rope tying tightly. Those 4 words, is really uncomfortable. The man lay on top of the woman, the light shining on his eyes, reflecting the neat lines, his eyes sparkling with a slender light, his voice low and hoarse. Are you telling the truth? Wu Jiang held his face. His eyes swept across his eyes, squinting, his red lips opened gently. Have I ever lied to you? Zhou Qi smiled softly. The clear laughter rang in her ears. She raised her thumb, gently touching his forehead, her voice soft. I thought you wouldn't be able to wait to do something right now. Her voice became softer and softer, making the man unable to restrain himself. The two looked at each other. The air filled with sweet pink. This time it was the woman's turn to take the initiative, gently bringing his lips into her mouth. Then her small and soft tongue playfully invaded his territory. The man's hand slowly slid in from under his nightgown. Her smooth waist was firmly held in his hand. He couldn't wait to pull up her nightgown. The nightgown slid over her long, soft, jet black hair. His vision was a blur after the hair rolled over. The scene before his eyes. Although he had seen it many times, every time he looked at it, he couldn't help but be amazed. She suddenly pressed him down. She raised one eyebrow, a little provocative. Let me. Zhou Qi retracted his raised hand, placed it on both sides of his body, with a look of enjoying watching the show. Wu Jiang adjusted her posture, sitting on his lower abdomen. Her fair waist touched his hardness. She was not moved at all. Raised her hand. In front of him, she tied her thick black hair with a rubber band on her wrist. She deliberately slowed down her movements. Every time her hair was lifted, it was like a deliberate seduction and provocation. She didn't seem to do anything romantic, but it made the man fascinated. After combing her hair, she raised her eyebrows and smiled at him. She leaned down, her red lips lightly touching his lips. Reaching his collarbone, she gently bit. The itchy feeling broke his emotional cord. The moisture from his collarbone moved down to his lower abdomen. The tiny nerve endings trembled. Then, the girl's weight completely disappeared. The heat hit his sensitive spot. Wu Jiang raised her head to look at him. After a look, a feeling of pleasure filled her. She gently put it in her mouth. Her nimble tongue touched his sensitive spot. The liquid was gently swept by her tongue. The saliva she swallowed and the liquid he secreted was salty. Zhou Qi's cold eyes were blurred by desire. His inky eyes staring at the sweet scene below him. He couldn't help but reach out and press the back of her neck to accompany the rhythm of the thrusting in and out. It was too big, too hard. At the moment it attacked her throat, she couldn't help but gag. But the man's reason and consciousness were already in chaos with desire. The movements in his hand did not stop. There was a wet feeling after the glands was lightly kissed by her. There was a burning pain after the teeth accidentally bit it. He was dominated by desire. She took the initiative. Chu Qi suddenly stopped. Her eyes were red. He stopped the movements in his hand. The big thing was released. The cold air made him shiver. Her light cough pulled his reason back. He quickly sat up, said, "Sorry." He kissed her eyes that were attacked by tears. Kissed her red lips that were violated. But she was not satisfied. Coughed a few times. Once again pressed the man down. Still with an even more provocative attitude. "I'm on top." Short and decisive. When she swallowed his bigness, she was already soaked. Wu Jiang reached out to grasp his greatness, shaped it in front of her wet door, and gently sat down. She swallowed her head, then felt full. Zhou Qi looked at the woman sitting on top of him, his eyes deep. Seeing that she did not move, he directly grabbed her waist, sat down. All of it went in. Wu Jiang was uncomfortably full, twisting her waist to release the beast in her body. The man followed her wishes, lifted her waist, then forcefully lifted her butt to receive her body. This way it went deeper. The feeling of pleasure was stronger. Zhou Qi took advantage of the moment when she was distracted by pleasure. He pressed her down, his whole body taking the initiative in this lovemaking, suddenly thrusting in and out. He leaned close to her ear, his voice hoarse and low. "Is this enough?" Wu Jiang hurriedly replied, as if giving in. "Enough, enough." Zhou Qi smiled, pulled out, then put her in a kneeling position. From behind, without hesitation entered her. He grabbed her white breasts with one hand, playing with her pink breasts, waiting for them to bloom. His movements below him non-stop. Wu Jiang's consciousness shattered, following his up and down movements. The release in her body was blocked by the man without hesitation in her vagina. He thrust into that oscillating stream, controlling her consciousness, and finally releasing himself in her body without hesitation. His hand holding her body had just loosened, and Wu Jiang had already gone limp on the bed. There was a milky white liquid slowly flowing out from under her body. Zhou Qi looked until his eyes were red. The thing under her stood up again. He said hoarsely, "Do it again." The man lay on his side behind her, one hand supporting one of her legs, entering her in a sideways position. This was a position that the two of them had never used before. Wu Jiang climaxed extremely quickly. On the man's back, there were not only scratches left by the girl, but also drops of sweat. Even his neck had a thin layer of sweat. He stood up and hugged her in his arms, using a position that Wu Jiang tried once and didn't want to try again. The position of holding a child's urine from behind, forcing her to see the image of the two of them intertwined, was Zhou Qi's perverse hobby. For example, right now, in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, Wu Jiang could see his wet cock freely entering and exiting her body. Zhou Qi carried her around the living room. Each step he took, he would thrust a few times deeper. Finally, he placed her on the sink, facing her. His eyelashes fell into a dark shadow. His black eyes looked at her, kissing her red lips. The movements below his body became more and more intense, while he and she were releasing. He was panting but said very seriously, "I love you." This lovemaking was too intense. Wu Jiang had just gotten out of bed when she fell asleep. Zhou Qi was wearing a bathrobe and sitting beside her. His eyes fell on her peaceful face. His lips pursed in a smile. The phone rang. Zhou Qi gently went to see. It was Old Man Wu. Zhou Qi turned off the sound. A moment later, the phone rang again. Zhou Qi pushed open the door and stood on the balcony to answer the call. Before Zhou Qi could say anything, a scolding voice came from the other side. "Dad told me to get married but I didn't. Now I'm messing around with some little star. Tomorrow, I have to roll back here for Dad." "Uncle, I'm Zhou Qi. Get lost." Let Wu Jiang answer the phone. "Uncle, I want to see you once. How about tomorrow? You're worthy too? Get lost." Let Wu Jiang answer the phone. Zhou Qi chuckled lightly. "That's right. The little stars in the entertainment industry are of course not worthy to see you. What if it's Zhou Qi from the Southwest Entertainment Company? Mr. Wu, please sit down." Mr. Wu looked at this young man. There was no denying that he really had a good appearance. Just relying on his appearance was enough to earn a rich living, let alone the family background behind him. Mr. Wu took a sip of tea. The taste was delicious, sweet, rich, worthy of good tea. "What do you want to talk to me about?" Zhou Qi smiled gently, and said frankly, "Wu Jiang." Mr. Wu held the porcelain teacup in his hand and suddenly stopped. His thumb lightly touched the slightly rough body of the cup. After a long while he said, "Our Wu family is considered a wealthy family in the eyes of others. But in front of the young master of the Zhou family, it is truly just a small household registration. Moreover, with Wu Jiang's personality, without me saying it, the young master of the Zhou family should also know that she is not the standard that the Zhou family is looking for a daughter-in-law. Right?" This is true. Like the Chu family, a prestigious family, a woman who marries into their family must have a strong family behind her. Then must be gentle and kind. Know etiquette, understand rules, and also have tricks and strategies. Wu Jiang, 1. Does not have a family that the Chu family values. 2. She is not a gentle and kind woman. The words that Mr. Wu said were extremely weighty. Since Wu Jiang did not meet the Chu family's standards for finding a daughter-in-law. The relationship between Zhou Qi and Wu Jiang in the end. Is Zhou Qi sincere or just looking for a new feeling? Zhou Qi smiled indifferently. I will marry her. Let her become the mistress of the Chu family. Mr. Wu heard this. His serious face also revealed a few traces of joy. But his sharp tone did not decrease. Wu Jiang has been spoiled since she was young. What if she marries into the Chu family and becomes a disobedient daughter-in-law? Chu Qi was sitting here today wanting to talk frankly with the person opposite him. The person opposite him wanted his attitude. He had come this far. There was nothing that he couldn't reduce his face. I guarantee that such a thing will not happen. Wu Jiang will be my wife in the future. Whoever dares to bully her is slapping me. Chu Qi paused for a moment, signaled to the assistant behind him, and handed a stack of documents in front of Mr. Wu. I will give Wu Jiang 20% of the shares of Southwest Entertainment. This is part of the wedding gift. In addition, I will turn Southwest Entertainment into a top entertainment company in the entertainment industry. Mr. Wu didn't really look at the documents. He smiled. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were obvious. I'm not selling my daughter. This isn't a sale. I just want to show my sincerity. The man under the table clenched his hands into fists. But his face was calm as if nothing was happening. There's still 20% left. Mr. Wu sneered, and coughed twice. Now that you're so famous in the entertainment industry, you might not be able to keep your position when you return. Zhou Qi raised his eyebrows. Calmly, don't worry about this. I'll take over Southwest Entertainment next month. Mr. Wu sized Zhou Qi up and down. Sighed, and his tone softened a bit. I only have one daughter. Please love her. After he finished speaking, he stood up and prepared to leave. Chu Qi was a little surprised by this change, and quickly stood up and said, I'll see you off. Mr. Wu turned his head and looked at Chu Qi deeply. All right, just remember what I said. Chu Qi watched Mr. Wu leave, feeling a little emotional, not knowing why. Perhaps he didn't expect that the Mr. Wu who was known to be cruel and cold on the outside also had such a gentle side. Ellipsis. Chu Qi's new movie started filming smoothly, but Chu Qi was absent from all the press conferences and promotional programs. And social media was buzzing with discussion. Haven't slept yet? Wu Jiang saw that the office light was still on, opened the door and asked. Chu Qi looked at Wu Jiang. A gentle smile reflected on her face. He pushed up his glasses. I'm about to sleep. I'll be taking office in a few days. I need to review my knowledge first. Wu Jiang chuckled when she heard this. She walked in, sat straight on Chu Qi's lap, and hugged his neck. Why are you in such a hurry to come back? Didn't you say you would stay in the entertainment industry for a year? Chu Qi reached out and lightly scratched her nose. His tone indulgent. If I don't go back to work, what will I have to marry you? Are you still dreaming of marrying me? Chu Qi lightly pinched her waist. What, do you want to marry someone else? Wu Jiang was tickled by him. I want a grand proposal. Okay, I will satisfy you. Chu Qi looked at her. His eyes filled with bright moonlight and warm lights. Wu Jiang lowered his head and kissed him. Ellipsis. Recently, there were many major events in the entertainment industry. The first event, Si Chunyuan, the little lover of the chairman of Southwest Entertainment, had an affair with a young star, was caught in bed by Mr. Wu, and was kicked out of the Wu family. The second event, the major entertainment companies encountered difficulties one after another. Only Southwest Entertainment developed rapidly, rose rapidly, and firmly sat on the number one position in the entertainment industry. Third event, Zhou Qi, an actor at the peak of his popularity and development, suddenly announced his permanent retirement from the entertainment industry. Fourth event, the new chairman of Southwest Entertainment is none other than actor Zhou Qi. Fifth event, the inauguration press conference of the chairman of Southwest Entertainment turns into a proposal ceremony. The New chairman Zhou Qi actually used 20% of Southwest Entertainment's shares to propose to photographer and star Wu Jiang. This is truly shocking.